to collect.
It's on this map. It's
I'd be a little cautious about looking at that in this way because
What's that?
TRI data is, they consider if a facility has an on-site disposal facility, a landfill,
Okay,
they call that a release. You know, it's properly disposed of into a permitted facility. And so their idea of what a release is different than what we think of as spill.
okay. And see that.
So those are, you have to be careful with this information because if there's releases, they may have a stack emission that's totally permitted, but it's still considered a release because it went out the stack,
yes.
even though it might be within permitted limits.
Okay,
So this can be a little bit misleading if you equate the toxic release inventory as equal to a spill inventory.
So we
We
need to study this.
You need to understand what the data is showing.
is there any place we can get information on the spill and not the releases?
Well,
Probably the National Response Center is probably the closest. I mean, a facility that has a release that's reportable, most things, I mean, the NRC, I think, has the biggest, well, maybe not the biggest. Myra, you're
A reportable spill. They are supposed to call the spill line to report it. So it'll come to IDEM. And our responders will track it and then go ahead and do whatever mitigation if they need response.
So question, so are there spills that would be reportable to the NRC that wouldn't be reportable to IDEM or vice versa?
We get the NRCs, they come in, and our on-scene coordinators go through all of those NRCs.
No, my question is,
We put them into our database.
no, my question is, in terms of like triaging a spill, I'm a company, I have a spill. So are there spills that I would have to report to IDEM that I wouldn't have to report to the NRC?
We get a lot of spills that get reported to us that are not reported to the,
So really, so if we looked at a combination of NRC and IDEM reports, knowing that there's going to be a fair number of duplicates because somebody reported to both. But if we looked at both the IDEM and the NRC, that would give us a pretty good idea of a release that happened in the state. Because anything that gets reported to the LEPC is going to get reported to the SERC. So that kind of cancels each other out. So the next question is, are the IDEM releases to the spill rule and the NRC, because the NRC has different, for some chemicals, has different reporting quantities than like the LEPC. Like you can, I mean, the NRC, in our opinion, NRC almost always gets notified with some maybe exceptions.
Yeah, at this site here, you know, list the top 5 facilities by total releases. I think one of probably the broad thing we need to take away is we need to collect data and evaluate data to really get a good, true picture of what is going on. If we're going to try to change state law to help facilitate things, we're going to have to start collecting some data, processing data to look at trends as compared to where we were to where we are today.
One of the things that a chart like that or a table like that helps, at least me, is to, are we capturing all the facilities in the state that should be reporting? I mean, are there facilities that, and probably not the BPs and the Cummins and the huge places, but these smaller companies. I know we had a facility on the south side of Indianapolis that was Carbright, and they sold car washing cleaners. Well, one of the stuff they had was hydrofluoric acid. But to them, that was something you just sprayed on a rim to remove brake dust.
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, but if you get it on your skin, it goes right to your bone and it's not a good
Yeah.
picture. And so, I mean, that's where I'm trying to think, you know, if we can, all these different tables and whatever to say, are we getting everybody that should be reporting? Because if they're not reporting, then our fire departments, our emergency responders don't know that they're there, or all the chemicals that they might have. And that's,
Yeah. So I just wanted to, and I'm glad you were here to help clarify that, that it's still, there's data out there we need to analyze. We need to collect and analyze data. We've got the map that shows our hazmat teams, and one of the things I just wanted to educate people is not every hazmat team is equal. And so a smaller hazmat team, basically, they're categorized type 1 team, type 2, and type 3. And I'll ask, because one of the reasons I want our hazmat people, how many type 1 teams do we have in the state of Indiana?
I have none in Northern Indiana.
We don't have any. Okay. And my point with saying that is, for a long duration hazardous materials incidents, that certain things can happen. We don't have a type 1 hazmat team to deal with it. And that's where our hazmat team in Homeland Security can bring some resources to table to complete and make a type 1 team. Like the city of Indianapolis, there's like 2 or 3 things they don't have that we have. Is there something, do we complete their type 1 team if we respond?
We could bring the equipment to complete the type 1 team. They have the manpower.
Is there any other department in the state that we could make them a type 1 team? Or is Indianapolis the only one?
Fort Wayne, South Bend, maybe.
I was gonna say, the thing that's probably limits most,
Manpower.
no, I was thinking biological detection. Typically, a type 1 team, my understanding has always been, we can do the chemicals, we can do the rad, but very few fire departments had biological detection. When we had the ramp, we complemented IFD, but we don't have, the ramp's not supported anymore. So I was guessing you've got real-time PCR.
We don't use the ramp. We've got a new, it's a one-time test. It's called, what is it, SAMI? But it tests, 6 biologics. And then we have a separate test that does 12 narcotics. So for white powder calls, we would use the
But to
combination.
me, that was always it seemed that was always what kept a lot of the bigger teams, like the Fort Wayne's, the Indianapolis, from being a type 1 team, is they just didn't have that ability to do the suspected biologicals. But everything else, that they had. The surface acoustical wave, that's kind of old stuff.
Yeah.
Where do they come offline from type 1s in Northern Indiana that we don't have anybody? It's how far south is it? Typical New County North that they don't have type 1 teams?
Well, I think, did you say Fort Wayne would be?
I would say Fort Wayne, South Bend are gonna be my 2 closest, being type 1.
Okay, and everything else.
I have, even my type 2 and type 3 teams, they have a lot of the WMD stuff.
Yeah.
It's the specialty leaders that don't have. It's the manpower that don't have.
And the specialty, and this is where kind of I wanted to go with this, because these specialty things are very expensive. That's the reason they don't have them. And I believe that, I think because our people respond, those types of things, the state's a good vehicle to get those high-tech pieces of equipment where they need to go. But do we have a database that tells us what these are as far as type 1, 2, or 3?
I am working on the northern part of the state right now. I am finding most of my teams are going to be 3s. A few 2s, nobody's gonna be, like I said, South Bend and Fort Wayne would be my 2 closest to 1s.
Yeah.
But I'm only halfway through.
Yeah.
So,
Here's a history lesson, and I wasn't here for this. In 2012, the state reached out to all the active hazmat teams in Indiana about FEMA typing. And one of the caveats that the teams wanted was, if we commit to typing, how is the state going to compensate us to become a typed team? And there was no vehicle there to compensate them, so it kind of fell by the wayside. You remember when they tried to do the typing? So the subjects came up a couple times since I've been here, and we get the same response from the teams is, if we're gonna put the effort, the manpower, and the time and the money into typing, what do we get for
I mean,
it?
we have the one the one type 1 team we have is the CST.
Yeah.
They are a type 1 team. And honestly, for what we're talking about with toxic industrial chemicals and LEPC type chemicals and things like that, I think so, yeah. I mean, we're not going to use, anthrax and things like that. I mean, I'd more like to see how many of those our hazmat teams have A, B, and C kits, and how many of them have booms and pads and.
Yeah.
And we're working a project, the three of us is working with our teams to get a good feel. I mean, we personally have a good feeling where they're at, but getting something that we can document and say, okay, this is what we can rely on you for. And also get the areas that they cover, mutual aid agreements and that kind of stuff.
And here's the survey that I stumbled onto while I was putting stuff together. It was done in April 2003. It lists the responsibilities, which we're all familiar with that. The state's challenges in the lack of staffing, lack of funding, and at last 28 states listed lack of staffing was their major challenge. Lack of funding was their number 2 challenge. Obstacles that were either most challenging or second most challenging. And then here's kind of a breakdown of what they showed: lack of funding, lack of staffing, lack of leadership or motivation. And I think too, that leads to your point, the lack of leadership. When you have a turnover every year, every 2 years, your plan starts getting traction and then you lose it whenever somebody leaves. In most jobs, that person just wants out the door. They don't tell them about all the things that they got lined up to do.
Can I ask a question? Who did the survey? I mean, who did they ask the questions to?
All states.
I mean, who in the state?
Yeah, I don't remember seeing anything, because years ago, we would get something from the EPA that was targeted to the LEPC, but I don't remember this survey.
Yeah, I just wanted who answered the questions because.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, that lack of leadership or motivation that LEPCs, you cannot overstate that. I mean, the reason that we have successful LEPCs, in my opinion, is in that LEPC, there's usually a very strong champion for the work.
Yes.
And I've seen it when we've had those champions have retired. Marshall County is one that I kind of remember. There was a gentleman who would always be at the EMAI conferences. And I think when he retired, about a year or two later, I noticed Marshall County was showing up as not compliant. And I think I mean, like even our LEPC, I mean, we've got 2 key people that really have, they're critical. And so finding that critical person.
I mean, personally, because, going to NASPO and meeting with these other states like we do, I can go down to the list. Lack of funding. I mean, some states do not collect tier 2 fees. Illinois is an example. Illinois does not collect tier 2 fees. So when they talk about getting their LEPCs motivated, they look at us and say, what do you guys do to get LEPCs motivated? We go, well, we got money. And if they don't comply, they don't get their money. So that's why a lot of them do their stuff. And they're like, wow, money?
So what do the Illinois LEPCs, do they have the same responsibilities that Indiana LEPCs do?
Well, because it's under, yeah.
It's a federal.
Well, I mean, but I didn't know if the LEPCs were doing the same things. I mean, are they?
Illinois has one person that runs their whole LEPC program. He's one guy. He runs the tier 2 manager. He runs everything.
But I mean, is Illinois a one, like, we heard that
No, they've got individual counties.
about counties, okay.
Take for instance, Iowa. I've talked to Iowa a couple of times. And, you know, she was at a conference once and she goes, how does Indiana get LEPCs to participate? We said, well, with funding. They go, where do you get the funding? We said, well, tier 2 fees, the facilities pay a fee. And they were like, wow, really? So, I mean, you know, Jackie's been there, you've been to NASPO.
Right.
I mean, when we go there and we talk to some of the other states, you know, we had 3 LEPCs go to this last NASPO conference down in North Carolina. And I asked all 3 of them, I said, now, compared to everything you've heard here, where do you rank Indiana? And they said, well, we're doing pretty damn good. I mean, we've got a really, really strong program in Indiana compared to a lot of other states. And I think Jackie and Melissa echoed that. So when I look at that, you know, some of the questions there, you know, lack of leadership from state and local political officials. I mean, we've got a lot of support from the state, technical assistance from the EPA. I mean, we work hand in hand with the EPA people out of Chicago, Monica, you know, with her, Chris, Jason Sewell, all the EPA people in Indiana. You know,
So is Chris the new Sheila?
He's new Region 5.
Yeah,
He's the new Sheila?
he's what?
Is he the new Sheila?
Sheila was the one before.
So in Region 5 in EPA, they have a person who's assigned to EPCRA. Is that who
He's
the,
over Indiana.
he's the EPCRA guy?
Yes.
Yes.
Can he come talk to the group sometime?
Sure.
Or can he come to, I mean, Sheila used to come to the meetings regularly. I mean, can we get Chris down here at all our meetings?
Just any one of these things, even whenever we talk about leadership from state, I'm not looking at other people in the state. I'm pretty focused on, that means us. You know, I know that there's some people in the state of Indiana that maybe feel that we don't give them enough leadership, or we need to offer. And I think I want to challenge our group to be well organized, get data, analyze data, look at our hazmat teams, look at our planning, and think for sure that we do a good job of leadership from our level to help support the locals.
And also from a county standpoint and a cities and town, at one time, and I think it's back in the early mid-90s, maybe the late 90s, there was a presentation made to the Association of Cities and Towns meeting, and also there was a presentation that's supposed to be made to the Association of County Commissioners, because with the turnover being every 2 years or every 4 years, by 2 years, everything looks great. And all of a sudden it falls off and everything looks great. As far as what we can do to solve some of that, as Mike was talking about, yeah, we have a great program, but we still have some newbies when we talk about cities and town leadership and also county commissioners.
Yeah.
And also we need to have some county attorneys.
And I'm sure a lot of that stuff you're talking about, we've already done it in the past. We've already done some of this, that we've lost the disconnect to the history of where we were at. And now, you know, I'm as much as a geek, I love seeing, this here. And going back, it's like, wow, what an idea. Why aren't we still doing that?
Well, 2 years ago, we went out and we started doing district workshops with the LEPCs. And we had to stop because we had a lot of people coming to the workshops that were attacking everything but what we were there to talk about. And we ended up having to stop them because they were becoming very confrontational.
Well, they're frustrated for a reason, you know, and their frustrations, I don't want any of us to take the frustrations personal, because they don't get compensated. They don't have guidance. And if you're in a position and you're not getting that, you're going to be frustrated. It's like they're not listening. They're not doing anything. The problems that we had this time last year of people not reporting, guess what? We got them this year. And what's changed from last year to this year? we're still doing the same thing. And I just want us to think about that as we move forward. Doesn't mean we're doing a bad job, but I think talking about these things openly and the challenges we have is there are certain things that we can do. Hooking up with EPA and having them at our meetings, key. They're a resource for us to help us in bringing some of the towns and cities and them into our fold to help network. That's a positive. Lack of training for the LEPCs. You know, today's day and age is, I think it should be relatively easy to have, and we talked about it, a state of the commission and the LEPCs that you talked about at our last meeting, that we could have that to offer to the LEPCs and put a video out to talk about, this is what happened in 2003. These were our challenges. This is what we're doing in 2004. So they can, that way they know that we're listening, we're addressing it. There's some things we can't change until we change Indiana law, but the things that we can help, our stakeholders need to see that we're involved with that. Lack of funding, let's see, overreaching theme, arching theme, priorities not met. And again, it's kind of what we're experiencing, developing and exercising plans, facility inspections, communicating risk to the public, tier 2 data and analyzing. And again, there's tier 2 is a huge database. And, you know, we got to figure out, we've got a ton of data in that. What are we doing with it? What are our biggest top 10 hazards in Indiana? How close are they to a active LEPC? How close are they to a hazmat team? You know, those types of data, we need to be using that data to tell us and help drive the direction that we need to go. And then assisting facilities complying, which we try to do. Active and inactive LEPCs, you know, we're not the only state, right? I wanted to throw that one out there, okay? As much as we say, you know, and like you said, Illinois doesn't have. Do they have LEPC? They just don't do tier.
They don't collect fees.
They don't collect fees. But at least to their data is, they're saying everybody's active in Illinois. I don't know. Again, who did they ask? I don't know.
I mean, if it is, I'd love to know their secret, because no money and yet they're 100%.
Yeah, what are you guys doing? Because honestly, the answer could be right in front of us and we're like, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. I don't know. But again, collecting data, we got 50 states to collect data, is to go back and see what are other states doing to meet the federal requirement. Obviously, they're doing different things, right? So I just threw that up there because I thought it was.
No, that's an interesting, yeah.
Type of emergency response plans. And so they broke it out from all hazards plan to freestanding all hazards, no emergency response plan and others.
Joe,
Yes.
back to that previous slide
Yes, sir.
about, and Mike,
I'll name them off.
you know, you were saying, you're saying for, what'd you say about Iowa? Iowa said, how do you get your LEPCs active, which to me says that they've got LEPCs that are not active, right? But if we look at Illinois, what does that say?
Active.
I was talking about Iowa.
I'm talking about Iowa.
Yeah, well, Iowa's got inactive ones.
But okay.
Inactive and what's the red? Yeah, inactive and unknown.
Okay.
Active, inactive, and unknown.
But if you look at Iowa, I think a lot of that is around your bigger areas too.
Yeah.
But because you look at the bigger counties in the north of Iowa, they're your rural counties.
And to be active, we're all talking apples to apples.
Again, yeah, what's their active compared to our active?
Right. I mean, they're holding meetings, they're writing.
Here, you know, what, again, yeah. I
mean, that's not an Indiana requirement that we meet twice in
know,
the,
it's be 4 times a year. That's in state code.
But is that,
It's not a federal requirement.
That's not a federal requirement. That's a state requirement.
The federal requirement basically is you just have to have a plan, response plans. Like,
That in itself tells me, you know, that it's maybe the way that our business flow, that we're maybe you require either too much or not. I don't know. We've got to compare to say, okay, you know, because whatever we do, I want it to be effective for the community and makes them safe. So if Illinois, in our view as a commission, is like, no, we want to make it a little more stricter than that, but maybe it's the Indiana code that's setting that standard.
well, I think a good point might be to the county that has a very few number of facilities. Maybe they don't need to meet 4 times a year. Maybe they can meet twice a year, once in the first half of the year, once in the second half of the
That's
year.
what we had in White County.
Well, again, that's where we talk about.
Oh, I know we have to change the law.
2 or 3 counties combining to be a LEPC planning district.
But it may be easier.
Yeah, but those marriages don't last.
It may be easier now. It's like, okay, you're pretty rural, you know, is you only need 1 or 2 meetings to meet the requirement.
That's what we're saying. I mean, to the point that Travis had about, you know, what are things that we can do that makes it, now maybe a Lake County with all that industry up there, maybe they need to meet 4 times a year. But the smaller, I mean, it should be maybe scalable or reasonable, or I don't know, but I know it talks about changing law.
Yeah, but that goes back to White County. Bob Bleicher, rest his soul, he died. He was the LEPC chair. He came to every meeting with the blue striped seersucker suit. All this, no joke, all the time. So you could recognize who he was. He died, but he stood up in LEPC, and I think they only had 3 facilities in his home county.
Yeah.
And he met 4 times a year, sometimes 5 times a year. And again, it gets back to the leadership model that you were talking about. What do we do and how can we do it?
Yeah. Because our system, you know, maybe it's just a little more stringent than what it needs to be. That would help.
We beat up on ourselves.
Yeah, you beat up on ourselves and, you know, sometimes if you back out of it and kind of see what's going on in the rest of the world, and we get a little bit different take on things. Okay.
What was that one about types of, is that interesting, the types of plans? Is that? Oh, you saw, okay, we saw that.
Yeah.
Okay. My bad. Apologize.
Limited resources for local planners and responder in remote areas, and that's kind of what we talked about, is there's not a lot of resources. You know, they have 2 or 3 businesses in the county, and you just don't get the support in Marion County. If there's a question that Jeff has about a certain chemical, there's a lot of chemists or people in the chemical industry that can help us out, you know, in some of those counties, they don't have anybody to talk to other than the sheriff, right? Lock them up. Keeping LEPCs active, confusion over requirements, their responsibilities, and that's where I think this training component is key, is we can create something. And this is where we go back to that $600,000. We can contract and make a training video for LEPCs out of that money for pretty inexpensive to help with this stuff.
Do you have training videos, Jackie?
I'm working on it. As soon as I can get House Connect to give me access to the test site again, where I can actually do the videos, yeah.
I understand that
how many?
it's self-creating videos. I think it's worth
Before the first.
getting a video company and making a nice professional training video.
Says, the statute says you only have to have 2 meetings, period.
Of something.
Have at least 4.
Turnover in the LEPC membership, lack of search staff.
I don't know where that came from.
Um,
It's not statute.
yeah, reporting testimonies.
They have a lot more staff.
Then, back to staffing and implementing anything when you have a volunteer, anything is difficult. Volunteer fire service is dying. It's hard to get people replaced, hard to get them active. And we need to understand that when we're trying to meet some of our challenges.
Two times every 6 months.
And then this is just some of the things: increased staffing, additional funding to provide for training and new LEPC members, increased regionalism of LEPCs. And I think, combining some of the areas or looking at the state as regions to help address some of our challenges that we have. Grant programs create, and that's grant-like program to sustain funding, option for fixed facilities to encourage stronger growth. And one of the things that too is we can team up with, and I think we need to. Indiana is big on trying to draw big companies to Indiana. The economic development engine of the state of Indiana needs support from our planners and our hazmat teams. If you're going to ask a company to invest billions of dollars of Indiana, part of that infrastructure that needs to be in place is how do we plan, how do we respond to that key corporation that's coming into Indiana? I think we need to develop that relationship with the economic drive, because a lot of the big battery building manufacturers are coming to the state of Indiana. A lot of times we can be viewed as a regulatory group, but it's important for us. We're also, we protect Indiana's investment on that economic engine that comes to the state. So if we have an incident at a facility, we don't want the thing to go up in flames and then we're out that investment, we're out. And I'll just use the Walmart warehouse fire. $1 billion loss. Hundreds of jobs. That had a major economic, for not just Plainfield, but for Walmart and all those other industries, the trucking industry. And we want to help support and protect that economic engine for Indiana. Change state laws to raise fees and fund, improve cooperation between state agencies that implement. Just enhancing agency leaders understanding their role to provide foundational guidance for programs. That's what we do. Provide guidance for how LEPCs can implement EPCRA. Share best practices. We probably have some really good LEPCs. They would just love to share what they're doing with somebody who doesn't, and create that network between counties.
That's what was in the newsletter, circular newsletter. It was about sharing the ones that did something extremely well the previous year and was given an award. What was your best practice? And we shared those type things at the conference, at the day of the conference. And it was more cohesive then than it has been since then.
When was the last time Indiana had an LEPC conference?
Total conference by itself, probably late 2000s, early 2010, 2011. Period.
What do you think about?
Because everything we've done, we've been involved with EMAI, and a lot of the involvement with ENAI was because, and Stephanie could tell you, because of the fact we merged dollars together. And then we got tighter and tighter and tighter on restriction. And now we're only involved in about an hour and a half at every conference.
And it's competing for people's time, I think. I mean, you've got EMA directors, even on the fire side. I mean, everybody is so busy, it seems like these days, to ask people to come to another conference, to take a day or two out of their schedule just seems challenging to get good attendance. I mean, I agree. I would love to see an IERC or LEPC where we're just talking about IERC and LEPC issues, and we're not talking about, like at the EMAI conference, I mean, they have all hazards, and really, we're just kind of looking at hazardous materials and chemicals and.
Jim, and the thing you're correct, the thing about the day and a half was all of that. But when we started merging with EMAI, we had a lot of the LEPC chairs that did not come because of the lack of time in there. We went from a day and a half to 1 day to a half a day, and now we got 1 hour and a half. Usually it's during lunch hour when everybody is out visiting vendors or they're outside smoking or whatever the case may be. So we don't get the exposure. We don't get the time to share the best practices with some of the LEPCs. I would like to see just an all LEPC conference period.
I would too. I just, and maybe that's something we would gauge in a survey that would go to the LEPCs to say, look, if we did a 1 day
Or a day and a half.
or a day and a half, and I don't know, could we, I mean, we wouldn't necessarily have to charge for the conference fee, but could we provide financial help to get them here? I mean,
We did pay for the LEPC chairs. We did pay for LEPC members when we had a day and a half. If they want to use their funds to come to the.
right, if they want to use
Yeah,
their
that's the
funds, but you've got an LEPC that already doesn't have a lot of funds.
If they wanted to use their funds, if we want to subsidize, my understanding.
Well, why can't we make it easier? Why do we make them have to go through the process of doing all that local stuff? Why can't we just say, you know what? If you're going to commit to be an LEPC chair and put your 20 hours in or put your time in, we're going to reward you with, we're going to put you up, we're going to pay for your travel. I mean, it may not even be possible. State law may not allow it, but just again, going back to what Travis, making it easy, how can we make it less burdensome?
And this is, I'll speak about it just before we actually get to it, that we got currently on the table of this amount of money of non-compliant LEPCs that might go back into that fund. That money is reinvesting it into a conference to help build them up, to help them get the information, the resources, and when we get into that part of the code, you'll see where maybe that could be an answer. But the conference is, unless we try it, we will never know. That I would like to put on, maybe right now, the back burner is maybe we're going to do this next year.
2025.
And there's plenty of good people out there that would love to present what they're doing in their counties that would help. And we can have presenters from the LEPCs and us and maybe some industry people, and to put together a good conference. And I just know having the conference, and it's going to be the first time, we're going to get some feedback about all the challenges they have, and that's okay. You know, we're going to hear stuff. It's like, ew, that stings. That's okay. I'm okay with that because it's real world stuff that they believe in, or they wouldn't even be bringing it to us.
I always thought it'd be a good idea for the chair of the IERC to have in January, have a short meeting in Indianapolis and invite all the LEPC chairs down for just I don't know if you can provide a lunch, but just have an opportunity to have a chat with the LEPC chairs or their designee if they can't come.
Those two in your notes.
But just to
Some
kind of,
conference and then meeting that they can just meet with me at some type of venue. Yeah, Cracker Barrel.
sounds good.
But no,
But I mean, to have that kind of that one-on-one, their ear, and not just be the formality of a conference, but just to be able to have a conversation like we're having this afternoon.
And also the other thing, if you could put on the, also present this, I like this, at the new county commissioners that are going to be elected later this year. Make this like when they do the association of
Yeah.
new commissioners, place this on go over this exact same thing.
Yeah.
As long as we clean it up a little bit between releases and spills, but I think we can still cover
Yeah,
releases, we can still cover spills
Yeah.
as well.
yeah,
But, and also next year with the Association of Cities and Towns in Indiana, with the new mayors that have started this year, their first conference is going to be in February or March, make the same presentation.
and honestly, most of, they're busy unless they won't know about us unless we introduce ourselves to them, because they've got law enforcement, they've got their health departments, their police departments, parks, everybody else is wanting time in front of them, right? And we need to make it a point to get
We
time.
can go to those meetings that, and that seems like a no-brainer.
I'm just saying, up to the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have been downtown Indiana.
Yeah, well, can you partner somebody like Ames, where he does like a legislative dinner every year?
Yeah, that would be good, but I don't think it was deep enough down at the local level, because the county council people are the ones that really know about a lot of money at the local level.
Yeah.
Not the LEPC money, but at the local level, we have to make them aware of what they need to do in order to be compliant in the county.
Yeah,
Well, no, they could be leaving money on the table that, because they're not doing these.
and the need's there. I think we can show easily the need is there.
So I have a question too. There's $600,000 funds that we have sitting in our account that's accounted for, like they're undispersible. What can we do with those funds? Can we disperse them out to communities? So can we say, let's say in 2025, if you fill out all your forms, you get compliant, you get extra money next year? Like that would be like a carrot to say, hey,
We'll get to the Indiana law that tells us what we can do with it, yeah. I don't know that we can just hand it to them, but I think there's a way.
I said, get compliant.
Yeah, get compliant.
Give the guys numbers.
Yeah.
They get the money. But I said, but if you get compliant next year, we will disperse all those funds to everyone who's compliant. So you get more money next year. That's what I'm saying.
We'd have to change the law.
I think we need to change the law anyway.
We'll look at
Yeah.
it. We'll get there. Participant EPA, I think it's key getting EPA back in our group, being at our meetings. Their roles and responsibilities, best practices, again, sharing best practices. Identifying a champion to help LEPCs to meet effort requirements, establish and enforce capability at state level to ensure EPCRA compliance at the local level, and involve multiple agencies, groups in discussion about compliance. Back to your county point is we need to involve more people than just the LEPCs. Like the county commissioners need to understand, their local health department needs to understand, their local fire department needs to understand that this is a component to integrate into the whole public safety plan of the county. Otherwise, if we don't educate them, they won't know that it's there. And they will encourage those LEPCs to be active because they know that that will help. Talk about lack of funding compliance. States need stronger enforcement options, withholding tier 2 funds for LEPCs without EHS plans. If I'm reading this right, is the capability to withhold funds, kind of what we're talking about is for those that don't comply. Maybe that is something, but again, maybe we reinvest those funds. So it does help the LEPCs to be functioning, to help them to get compliant. Quarterly meetings with EPA, we've talked about getting them in here to collaborate.
I'm happy to see that we're still using the nomenclature CERCs rather than IERC.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, this is a website too. I don't know if I made a link here. I did. Just, I wanted to make it available, from resources, which some of you may already know. But there's a lot of online training with EPA on a lot of these requirements. But I think it's important to make it Indiana specific.
I think the important thing to remember is EPCRA is fluid, it's living. I mean, just scroll back up. I mean, it's changing in terms of now we've got PFOA and PFAS
Yes.
and so again, as an LEPC, I mean, to me, the CERC should communicate this to the LEPC and then the LEPC delivers the message locally. Because, people may not be tracking this, or it may take them a while before they realize that this change has occurred.
And back in the 80s, PFAS was not a thing. The 90s was not a thing. 2000s, it's taken a while, but now it's a thing really to be recognized. And what is the risk to the community and where's it coming from? And what do you do with the contamination? I know the fire service in particular is really starting to be able to, we're going to get a deep dive and start doing some blood testing on firefighters to compare their levels as to the general population. Whether they're on the hazmat team or whatever, and start comparing some of those things.
One question from a fire side, just deviating. I was noticing the trailer fire in Indianapolis last night, and it was on the news this morning. There was smoke everywhere. The siding was burning. There were some firefighters standing in the middle of it with all the smoke and the haze, some with SCBAs, others walking around with nothing on. Is that nomenclature? Is that correct? From a fire code standpoint?
I didn't see the pictures, but firefighters at every opportunity where SCBA should be.
This morning, some channel,
Yeah,
WRTV, they're
Yeah.
walking in, actually into the trailer fire.
yeah, probably not the healthiest.
Yeah, a lot of it depends on the township. Like some township fire departments have to stay on air until after overall. Some townships
During overhaul.
during, okay.
Yeah, so, you'll see that different variations. So. Okay, let's take a break before we get into the Indiana code. We'll take a 10-minute break. Okay, we're just gonna go through Indiana code. Some of it we won't spend much time on, other parts of this.
Actually, I
Put me to sleep.
We'll have some discussion,
know.
but this is, the code tells who, the commission's made up of. So this is why we have the makeup that we do. Getting people in these positions that we've talked about long-term. If we have a constant turnover in this group, it's going to be hard to get traction, to get things moving and trying to re-educate. I just know, since I've been in my job, it's a learning curve, and all this is a learning curve, I'm sure. And I very much appreciate the members that have been here for a while to bring the history to us, to help us. This is what worked before. This is what isn't working now. So I think there's great value in that. Then the officer shall appoint chairman and duties of the commission. And this is where back to my mission statement, the duties of the commission I would like to see, and think about if we do make a mission statement that comprises of what our duties are, the commission shall do the following. Encourage and support development of local emergency planning efforts to provide state government entities, local governments, and the public with information concerning potential chemical hazards in Indiana. It's like, that's number one, that's listed, is that's our primary function, is assist the state in complying with the requirements of SARA. Design, supervise the operation of emergency planning districts in Indiana. Gather and distribute information needed for effective emergency response planning. Appoint the members of local LEPC planning committee of each emergency planning district. What's number 5 is how do we do that currently?
It's the roster approval.
They submit it to us,
Yeah.
and this is, to me, this is almost just, appoint members, is they give us a list. Do we, we just look at the list and put our stamp on it. We don't evaluate all the LEPC. How many LEPC members are there in Indiana? 92 times what?
Yeah.
Well, at least 12.
Is number 5, if I was gonna do something, it's like I would either change that to something else, but there's no way we can appoint. I mean, it is just because they submit it to us, we put a stamp on it, we accept it, but it's just one of those things in state law is.
Well, that appointing word is powerful, because we
Yes.
had that discussion back when the creation of the county boards and
Yes.
agencies that the state said, and I know that the attorneys don't think it's here right now, but
Yeah.
I mean, that is spelled out, that appointing, because as the locals, we were saying, well, just approve. I mean, if all you're doing is approving us, just put approve. And they're like, oh, no, we have to put appoint, because that's our duty, is to appoint.
And that's the rub. That's the
Well,
rub that
yeah.
people, and I get it,
I think it's more appropriate when the LEPC members were considered state employees under the statute.
Mhm.
But now that that's changed and they're no longer considered state employees, so they're not subject to the ethics or the purchasing procedures. I'm not so sure that couldn't be changed now and not really be a concern.
Yeah, maybe shall submit a list of your members.
Right.
To me, and it's a big thing right now, home rule, communities want to regulate themselves, run themselves.
Yeah.
And this is an opportunity that we can maybe remove this rub, is just let them appoint and let us know who they are. I don't know. It's just something I think we need to investigate on what that looks like. And to me, because I don't want to, I hesitate, even in my position with the fire service, I don't want to be the fire department, police department. I don't want to have to go out and you're not compliant, we're here for education. We're helped to support. And that's kind of the approach I think is a better approach than being The local emergency planning committee shall do the following: satisfy the requirements of SARA, prepare submit roster committee members to the commission at least one time a year, meet at least 2 times a year on separate days every 6 months. Each year, prepare submit a report to the commission that describes the expenditures of the local emergency planning committee and the preceding year that were paid out for the money distributed. So that says shall, this is what they're supposed to do by Indiana state statute. You have any questions or comments? You know, I think
They
that
only have to do it, item 2 said only one time per year, is that right?
submit a roster.
Yeah.
So
They,
what,
they submitted an initial roster.
yeah, that's what I mean.
They do updates, but
Okay, they do the updates. So why are we trying to approve the updates if we just approve the first one anyway?
And that's where I think if they appoint their own members, then it takes us out of
and
that.
honestly, I don't think the last 2 meetings we've approved members, have
We
we?
haven't,
So we haven't done it the last 2 meetings, so it's
And at least I know,
kind of one of them things that's kind of fell away to the wayside and
I think we need to make it formal. Because of the fact, if we, at least I know one county that says, hey, why are you guys approving folks that we think should be on our LEPC?
Yeah.
well, the way it works in tier 2 is when they submit their initial roster by the date, which is April 30th, the tier 2 coordinator or the LEPC coordinators go in and approve that roster, which officially says approved by the IERC.
Right.
And so once that's done, they, on behalf of the commission, have approved that roster.
Exactly.
and then we usually have to bring it in the past, since I've been here, we would bring it to you guys after we've approved it for your vote, but like you said, the last 2 times it's been, we've not done it.
Well, and I think by state statute, we're supposed to. And again, you know, it's kind of a moot point, but it's state statute, so
Anytime we update is, we've got the state statute says we have to approve it.
prove it once a year.
Once a year. Oh,
Once a year.
approve it once a year.
And
But
then they can
let's
update
say
it.
in the February meeting, we approve it.
Yeah.
January meeting, we approve it.
Yeah.
And then there's 10 people off of Bartholomew County.
We do it in January, we probably do it in May because it's not due until April 30th.
Okay, well, whatever. But
Yeah.
the next meeting, they could have 10 people that they've changed.
Yeah,
We don't have to approve them.
that's correct.
So-
At least that's what and I think we can maybe
We can
suggest
make it
different wording.
a thing in the main meeting, we just say approve all rosters for the state and vote on it and all, because again, on behalf of the commission, they've already went in the system
And
and approved it.
and I would leave, you know, not even approving it, that we accept something besides, because I don't know who these people are, you know?
Doesn't the statute already identify who the LEPC members have to be?
Categories.
The categories.
Yeah, that's something, they
Okay.
couldn't even submit a roster report without each category being filled in
Right.
on a tier 2, so.
And you don't have to have, if you got a radio personality, you don't have to have a radio personality and a radio personality. We found that out back in the mid-2000s.
Next is local emergency planning committee member may appoint a designee to act on their behalf. And then there's some statutory stuff that has to be met in order for that to take place. Got to be in writing, specific duration, submitted 2 calendar days before the meeting. And so it just lists the requirements of that. Commission may revise its appointment of members of the local emergency planning committee under subsection 8.5. Interested persons, including county executives, may petition the commission to modify the membership. Local emergency planning committee, and this is where it's changed, is a county board of the county identified in one of the following. And so this is where I guess it changed it, the county wording for those.
Yes, it created, because when some people thought, well, as a special state appointee or as a state committee or whatever, that it protected them, provided some insulation from the counties saying, oh, you've got money, or, oh, you've got this, or whereas now that you're a county board, yeah, I think there was a perception that the locals might see them as easier to go in and do things. They didn't see that distinct wall.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't the other issue also that the members felt like they lost the protection of the Attorney General's office? If for some reason they were found liable or sued for some reason, if they were a state employee, then they're subject to protection by the Attorney General's office.
And
But-
the thing is, we're taking a volunteer group and asking the state to be their legal representatives. Have they lost that in this? I would be concerned too,
Because
because,
they're not appointed. They're not a special state appointee anymore.
yes,
And so they're just a county volunteer. And so as a county volunteer, I know the attorney made some, was it Justin?
Justin, I think.
Made some comments about, well, county boards are, you're protected. But it was like, well, the county employees on a county board. But the private industry people that volunteer or serve on a county board, are they protected the same way that they were protected when the LEPCs were special state appointees?
you know, or maybe we can ask the Attorney General's office to give us clarification on how that plays out.
Yeah. I think that's the one legal point that has never really been, no one's been willing to put down in writing how that would work or how they would be protected. And I think that's where it's caused some.
In the worst case scenario, you have extremely hazardous substance, you have the worst case scenario, it goes. We have loss of life. That's a very legalistic environment you're entering. And so I can see where, just big incidents like that, everybody's put on notice, you're gonna be sued. Everybody is. So it's just something we need to think about, maybe follow up on, maybe with you.
I think it would be good if we could get a final, or as much as possible, a final answer. So people knew where they stood, whether they were protected or they weren't protected. And if they weren't protected, then is there a way for us to offer protection? But if they are protected, then we can say, look,
Yeah, it's
we've
just,
researched it.
just put it to bed with some sort of documentation.
I wanted to go back up. I hate to, on the previous one where you were talking about the kind of the proxies. So, I mean, our current proxy system with tier 2 manager, I don't think really works this way. I mean, we don't specify the duration of the appointment. I mean, we designate proxies, and that proxy is on tier 2 manager as basically a permanent proxy.
In here to prevent somebody from saying, hey, I can't be at the meeting today. Marshall, you're going to my place. He's my proxy now. So, because it says it's got to be in there, 24 hours or 2 days before. But I think the way it was set up in tier 2 manager was officially you put the proxies on the roster and they're actually on the roster as proxy. So.
Right, okay.
So if you want to change your proxy, you're going to have to submit a roster change to make it official.
Exactly. Okay.
And that's, I think, to prevent somebody just showing up and saying, hey, Aaron's my proxy today.
Well, I was just saying like because we don't specify a duration in tier 2 manager. We just identify them as a proxy and they're there until we move them either off or we either inactivate them or move them to a primary.
Well, we had some people show up as proxies for a meeting. That way they could stack the vote or something. And
Reason why.
Like- that was another non-compliant meeting, but that's what they did.
Do we need to modify tier 2 reporting to match what state law says?
I mean, but it just says it's in writing because it's in tier 2.
Yeah.
So that's in writing. And again, specifying the duration of the appointment, it's while they're on the roster, they're the proxy. So unless you change your roster, that proxy stays the same. To change the proxy, you gotta change your roster. Which is no different than going to a meeting and voting on it. They just can't change it. It's gotta be voted on at the meeting. So
Yeah.
I think it's good in tier 2. What do you guys think? You guys,
I mean, I'm fine. I mean, it works for me. I just know that we don't have we've never specified the duration of their appointment. They're a proxy until they aren't anymore.
TBA.
Until they're not on the roster.
until you change your roster.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this,
The members, they will get a member until you change the roster. So.
Maybe that's the duration is until they're changed.
Yeah.
members don't have a duration.
Talk about the county thing.
Go back, Marshall.
No, too late.
This is where we're talking about the emergency planning committee's, districts, where we combine more than one county. So this came up and
Yeah.
we wanted to talk about it at this meeting before we move forward with it with a couple of counties. Is the way it's written in the code is one county has to be basically the controlling LEPC. The other county basically joins. The caveat to that is the counties that are basically disbanding and joining have to agree. And I seen it somewhere that the commissioners have to be notified in writing that this is getting ready to happen.
We did because of, it was Orange and what was it, Washington County? Jeff? Orange and Washington County that.
Yeah, that was the
came
first one.
together. Orange, who was the lead in that, Bruce? Was that Orange County? I think it was Orange County, but they also had to go back to the county commissioners and notify the county commissioners that it's gonna happen, and the county council, then they bring it to us and we would approve
But
it. now.
if the county commissioners do not agree to it, then the county has 90 days to get their LEPC active.
Yeah, and the reason the county commissioners, the pitch that they had, well, if I'm getting 5,000 and I can get 5,000, and I don't have an LEPC, this county's getting 5,000, so you're gonna take my 5,000 and give it 10,000, and it says yes, because they're gonna be covering both counties. That was the pitch.
But the thing of it is then the two counties can combine. So we're looking at Jay and Blackford. So Jay and Blackford would both be on whatever county.
Yes. Whoever-
Basically, if Jay County is the lead, Blackford County people will be on the LEPC. And actually, Blackford County can be the chairman of the LEPC.
Pilot and full policy.
Yeah. So again, we wanted to clarify this in this meeting, and I think that's our next project is to go to Jay
Go for it.
and Blackford County.
From one commissioner, I think it's a wonderful idea.
And talk to both county executives and say, hey, this is the plan. If they agree to it, then we will put the two together and create the district.
And take some of Marshall Jones' stats as far as releases and spills for those counties. This is one reason we're doing it, because you have X number of spills in your county. You don't have a stand-up LEPC. So this is gonna help you from a planning standpoint.
But we've talked to both county LEPCs and both of them are receptive to the idea. And they've actually talked to us. And we're gonna try it with it. And if it goes smooth with this, and then some of our inactive counties like Orange, Tipton, we will approach a neighboring county and say, hey, when you guys absorb them.
And while you're at that, well, I'm gonna be talking to Jennings County.
Up there on the list.
And Decatur County.
Get counties needed.
No, Jennings County is not.
But they have an active LEPC, which is looking on stuff.
Yeah, but they're inactive right now. So
Decatur County, I've talked to Brad Spear, the EMA, and we're gonna get around. They're ones that died during COVID,
yes, okay.
and they haven't been brought in to get going yet.
So how's the funding work? So
Funding would go to the main county.
okay,
No,
so they'll get the funding for both.
Total for both counties would go to Jay County if they were the lead
They
county.
become the fiscal.
But any money spent by that LEPC, the district would be both counties. So if they were gonna buy absorbent and we say district-wide in the funding, so district-wide would cover both counties.
Yes. Wonderful idea.
And that's the plan to get the ones inactive with that. So,
Plan is 2022.
This is one that, again, we might explore because there's additional funds that can come to us. Assistance from public, private sources, implementation of this chapter, appropriations, grants, donations, equipment, services. Is if there is needs in Indiana and somebody is willing to donate to help support the mission of the commission, right? We can get funds from that. So if XYZ company wanted to do something to help benefit our mission, we can accept those funds. Now, gonna go into 600, the legal fund? I don't know.
well,
I would also do services in kind too.
Yeah,
if we had, say if we had HEPCO, they're a major spill cleanup contractor in Indiana, and they wanted to donate equipment to Indiana hazmat teams. We could probably get that equipment and then distribute it to areas that we felt the equipment was needed. I could see something like that, but I mean, grants, unfortunately, and this is the way it's been explained to me by, our chief financial officer, anything that comes into the CERC, automatically the state puts into that fund. So
Into what fund?
that,
Legal.
that,
legal fund.
in the general budget.
So
But again, that money can't be spent by anybody else. It's our money, but to get more of that money, we have to go to the budget committee and basically ask them.
But again, we're giving sleeves out of our vests.
So,
Yeah. And that's what I think legislatively, are either talking to someone in the finance area,
Yeah,
because we need to carve that out.
I will say this, we don't have any issues getting money from them.
No, it's not that.
But
It's not that. Let's use that money, as we said before, the 35, 40, 45, $50,000 or whatever. Don't put it into hypothetically the 3,400 account, put it in the 3401 account. If you need money,
that's right,
use that.
101.
yeah.
There ain't no 34.
No.
Yeah.
I'm saying hypothetically, two accounts,
Yeah.
put it in a separate account.
We need to track it.
We need to track in that separate account. If you
Right.
need money for next year, 140,000, you don't get it from that account, you still go back to our original account, which is the mother account, and say we need $140,000. Use that other account of funding to do the training, to do the video, to do whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and I think as we explore that account is, okay, what's it take to get it out? How do we do a better inventory of why the money is there? Again, it's tracking data, tracking funds. In order to show any need, we got to take something to them. You know, right now we have an account. We don't know exactly where all that came from or how much, we know how much is going to go in this time around. But as we look, it's like that money's got a purpose and I want us to use it on a good purpose that's well thought out.
So Steve, are you saying that the commission, the CERC, the IDHS could apply for grants?
They can receive.
We can receive a
Grants.
grant. That's
Well,
why,
you're going to receive one if you don't apply for one.
that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So what I'm saying is, if there is grant money out there from federal government or somebody, I mean, I don't know that I've ever heard of the IERC applying for a grant.
Who's our IERC grant writer?
I would be our grant department.
Well, it doesn't have to be. It can be, we hire our own grant writer. I'm just thinking out of the box, you know, this is something in state statute we're not taking advantage of.
I mean, there could be grants out there that we don't know of that we might be, the IRC might be eligible for.
And wouldn't it be cool to get a grant on helping support local LEPCs to help get them active? Give them the tools, a grant for something to support that effort, you know?
Yeah.
So I think there's opportunity there that, again, if we just accept the way we've done business, I think state statute allows us to broaden a little bit from what we've done.
But you can do more of that.
Yep.
Apply for.
I don't know.
Let's see here. This chapter, except the provision in section 7, this chapter does not apply to. So we don't regulate transportation, storage of incident to transportation of substances or chemicals to this chapter, including transportation, distribution of natural gas. So anything over the road, we don't have any jurisdiction on. The way I'm reading it, it's just fixed facilities.
But we still get, LEPC still get notifications of.
Yeah, they get notifications because it's part of their plan that they've got to submit on routes of.
No, I mean incidents, transportation incidents. If you have if you're a transporter of hazardous materials and you close a road for, I don't know, some amount of time, you have to notify the LEPC. I thought.
Yeah, no, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what you mean. I mean,
Yeah.
substances that are in transport are not subject to reporting.
Yes.
Now, I will say, just to kind of put it on people's radar, we are running into facilities or a facility that this little transportation, when does it no longer in transit? We had a facility parking rail cars on a spur that was, and
We approached Lucas Oil because they used to park across 64. And they had 1267 crude oil cars. They were placarded, so that is considered a residue car. Could have 10% in, so we went down and counted the cars and told them they were over the requirement for storage. They said, okay, where do we sign up? And they basically filed a tier 2 as a crude oil storage facility.
Okay.
So
I mean,
yes,
so one of the things COVID did is that people that were having supply chain issues were ordering more because they were worried they wouldn't have enough. And then when all that stuff came on site, they would put what they normally would have and then what the extra stuff was. And we've been kind of going round and round with CSX in this facility about whose product is it?
EPA explained it is the LEPC can approach them. If it is a placarded car and it's empty, it's a residue car, or if it's full, you can figure out how much pounds are there.
Yeah.
And if they're over the reportable quantity, they have to report.
Yeah, and I think as we get into the code further on down, there are special considerations given to stuff that's outside of the norm that pose a significant risk to the community that us as a commission can require them to report to us. And then they have to have emergency plans and all that stuff, and we'll look at that, so.
Yeah, because that's the way we did it with Lucas Oil, and they said, no problem, we'll report.
Oh, it's actually the next slide. The substance and subjects chapter is on the list, under 42 USC. And, when it exceeds the threshold of the reporting quantity, and this is what C is important for the purpose of emergency planning, the Indiana Emergency Response Commission may designate additional facilities that are subject to this chapter if the designation is made after public notice and opportunity for comment. The commission shall notify the facility affected by the designation under this section. I don't know that we've ever done that. Maybe you have. But it seems to me like we can, if we are justified in saying this facility has to report to us, that we can get our facts together, have a public hearing that we're going to do this, and then require them to do all the emergency planning and report. And then my question is, this is beginning to be a thing, is lithium utility scale battery engine storage systems, where we have acres of lithium batteries that the power companies are storing energy until a high demand area, and then they'll put it back into their grid. I just want us to think about, is that something that we might be able, how do we do that? Are we justified in doing that?
We've talked with EPA about this subject. EPA says, EPCRA says, this is the federal law. The state can't go above and beyond federal law. We can't go below federal law, but we can go above it.
But if they have 10,000 pounds of whatever chemical is inside the lithium ion battery, they would have to report that because it's an SDS and more than 10,000 pounds, right? So we would really be looking at the ones that are less than 10,000 pounds.
You're gonna have to look at the chemical makeup, of the lithium battery, and have to break it down by.
No, if it's an SDS, if it has like,
It's like the sulfur or, sulfuric acid in the lead acid batteries. A lot of the Verizon sites, the AT&T sites, they got the battery backups on their sites. They report.
because they got EHS, they have
Because they got,
sulfuric acid. But I've got companies that have 10,000 pounds of steel. And because it has an SDS, because if you heat it, it'll evolve off toxic gases, they're reporting their steel.
Steel.
Yeah.
Again,
10,000 pounds
right.
SDS. I mean, that's CERCLA. I mean, that's kind of what it says.
This subject we kind of talked about this a week or two ago at the Midwest Hazmat Conference.
No.
And you've got to break down that chemical inside that lithium ion battery and see how much of this chemical is an EHS or reportable quantity and kind of break it down that way. The easier way is like the marshal said is have a public hearing on it and say, this is what we're going to start doing is, these energy backup or these energy storage systems, because these things are dangerous. And most of them are in rural communities where the local fire departments have absolutely no training on dealing with them, so. But like he said, I think that would be the way to do it is.
Right, and I don't see any other tools. I mean, I don't see any other tools that would capture the information for the first responders, for the community, and then potentially provide some revenue to help with training and.
EPA is working on lithium ion batteries, but it's probably like 3 or 4 years
The
down.
state legislature last year adopted NFPA 9 something that dealt with this. So as this industry grows and wants to build out in Indiana, and that document, which was adopted by the legislature, tells them that they have to submit emergency plans. They've got to train the fire department on an annual basis, and there's some requirements built into that. But I think it's just one of those things as a commission, we need to have our eyes open to all these new technologies and things that are going on so that we don't have an incident that was blindsided that maybe we could have been involved in the process to help.
Is this considered, Bruce, is this considered rulemaking or no? No, okay, all right, I wasn't sure. I mean,
Statutory authority given to the response commission to make that designation, so it's already, that wouldn't be considered rulemaking.
so really what the IRC would be doing is trying to figure out what is the threshold? What is the tipping point that you would need to notify?
Yeah, do we feel like it's risk? And, I think too, is if we think something needs to maybe be put in, is for us to get with the industry and sit down with them. Tell me about your facility. Is this something, because we don't know. I'm not a lithium battery expert. I don't know all the ins and outs, but if we think it is a risk to the community and might fall into this type of category, is to do the homework and see what that looks like with the industry. And then this goes through, the owner of the facility goes through their responsibilities and the quantities and thresholds to where they have to report.
So Mike, is it still the position of the IRC that if a facility has chemicals for, we'll just say 1 day in 2024, they have to report it in next March 2025, right? I mean, well, and that's probably an extreme, but we have facilities that say, oh, I quit operating. I closed that plant in February of 2023. And so when they call us, we say, well, you operated in 2023. You still need to report your March 2024 because you had chemicals on site, even though you're not in business today. And that's still right?
Yes, and if you have an issue with that, let us know. We will approach the EPA and the EPA will let them know.
Well, same for us.
They would rather pay our fees than the EPA's fees.
Oh, I know. And for me, it's more of a selfish. I want the count and I want them to pay the revenue so that when we get our check in a few weeks.
And I think per law, they have the chemicals on site for one day.
That's what, yeah. I mean, it may seem,
They are supposed to report right then.
Yeah.
So,
but this is this reporting of changes, because we had one facility and I was not real happy with the guy because he didn't understand that, well, we think you've still got several thousand pounds of whatever, and you closed your shop and we don't know. So every time we drive by there, or if our fire department gets a run to that address, they're going to think you've still got all this bad stuff. And
I've had instances when I was a boot on the ground, an industry was like a national industry and they would file for all their facilities, and I can't remember what the chemical was. And it's like, what in the world are they doing with that chemical there? So I got in the car and drove out there. It's like, this reporting says you have X, Y, Z. And I'm like, what? So it's right here in the local facility that they didn't have it. It was just a corporate, we're just going to send it out. Right, commission shall notify the administrator of facilities subject to this chapter. Local emergency planning for preparation and review of their plan. At least once a year, circumstances facility. And this is kind of the question that came last year when it was on that list, routes likely to be used for the transportation of a substance on the list of extremely hazardous substance. And then, I think it's worthy of discussion too in today's day and age. We need to guard the information we have, and maybe that's something we need to look at in putting in Indiana code to better define what happens with information that we don't want terrorists to know about. Right to know was perfectly good in the day it first came out, and I'm not so sure that we want to be as free as we were 20 years ago. And so I think this is something we need to think about, look at, and additional facilities contributing to subject to additional risk due to the proximity. I know there's stuff that comes through Indiana all the time that I'm aware of, some of us are aware of, that we just don't want everybody to know about. But we also need the communication link whenever something goes awry with one of those shipments, that we have the right people engaged in the conversation, so we're not showing up and getting people injured.
and this subject did come up in one county that, a citizen group came to the LEPC wanting information. And they came to us and we said, yes, you can give me information, but you can redact anything you want, any phone numbers or anything like that. So they were able to tell the neighborhood group, yes, these are the chemicals in the facility. No, you can't have this person's number or this person's number.
I mean, the routes, again, for us, that it all depends on how you define route. I mean, to us, what's important to us, if they're using surface streets, if they're using the interstates, if they're using rail, if you're down in southern Indiana, are they moving it on the Ohio?
Somebody say, the chemical comes in on I-69 and comes off on Smith Street and comes into Southgate. That's what they put in there.
Wow. We've talked to our facilities, we're like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, depends on which way the truck's coming from today.
And again,
Or what roads are closed, or where traffic's backed up.
here's how we explain it to the LEPCs is whatever information you're putting in your LEPC plan is for your local responders. So your local responders know that if there's an EHS in this facility, most likely this is the area it's coming through. So now your fire department, your first responders know, hey, this is usually a route where this stuff is delivered to this factory. We don't need to know, I turn right here, I turn left here. They just need to know this stuff is coming in on I-69 coming through this housing addition, probably going to this facility.
Every battalion chief in every fire department should have that in their car.
They should know that.
They should know that.
The DOT guidebook, look at the tank. Okay, what's that tank good for? You know?
And again, this is information in that emergency or LEPC plan that you don't have to give to the community.
Right.
I mean, that's community right to know is there's certain things in there that they need to know, stuff they don't. So if this isn't in your plan, that is something you do not have to give the community.
Anyway, methods, procedures to follow, facility owners, operators, designated community emergency response coordinator. I think more than anything, because it talks about evacuations, training programs and stuff, is I think us as a group, I mean, I like big chemical industry, they have people hired to do all this. They have liaisons to hazmat teams and fire departments. It's your smaller facilities that maybe they're not acquainted with the incident command systems, that they're not sure, you know, this is a piece maybe where we can help smaller industry to understand what these are, because in a lot of cases, they don't have the education to understand how they're going to protect the community if there is a release. You know, it's always refreshing. Back in the day, we had a lot of players in the chemical industry in Marion County. And when we showed up, I'd already spent a lot of time with the guy in trainings already. I could trust, understand what he's telling me. But to have that liaison between that facility and emergency responders, training programs, so they understand, you know, mitigation efforts, or not to try to mitigate, just get people back. But that's the things. Let's see, methods for schedule exercise. The commission, if there's no emergency planning committee of a facility who participates in emergency planning process as a facility emergency coordinator. Oops. The owner operator shall promptly inform emergency planning committee of any relevant changes, and industry changes all the time. They're adding tanks, they're taking tanks away, their inventory is changing, they're using different chemicals. A lot of it's driven by the price point of what they're trying to do. A lot of changes take place from facilities, and maybe just trying to help facilities understand they need to be in constant communication with their LEPCs whenever they have changes that are going to affect our ability, their ability to respond. Commission shall review local emergency planning and make recommendations to local emergency planning committee on revisions. And again, it's tough because we got 92, we got all this information. How do you review all those? Do all their plans make sense? You know, I've had several plans. When you dissect it, it's like your plan needs to change, you know, as you got somebody putting it together that don't understand emergency operations. But then if they have a release, what they're supposed to do, if they have an exposure to persons solely within the site, it says this section does not apply if it's solely within the site on which the facility is located, and it gives some ifs.
See, and this brings up a point. We had a incident and Bill might remember it. 4/9/24. There's a release of anhydrous in Warren, Indiana. I didn't even know this happened, but somebody died from the release. They killed one of the workers. So, did you hear about that one, Bill?
No.
Okay.
Was it a
It
a local farm, or was it a
co-op.
was it a co-op commercial business?
Employee was performing maintenance activities on an anhydrous ammonia nurse tank when human error caused the release of 3,347.5 pounds of ammonia to be released into the atmosphere. This is the good part. After 9 hours of a release, the ammonia tank was completely empty. And that was my scary thing, is you let it release for 9 hours. And I found out about this from, the EPA guy at NASPO. He asked me if I'd heard of it, so.
That's a new.
Mentioned it to him,
this was-
because I spoke to one of the Huntington County deputy directors.
County,
So who was the ammonia under the control of?
who was what?
Who was the ammonia under the control of?
The company name is Nutrien.
Was it at their facility or was it?
It's at their facility.
At their facility.
I don't know.
4/6 of 24. And, ambulance response, no police response, no fire department response.
So does this facility store anhydrous ammonia? Did this facility, are they a tier 2 reporter?
Yes, yeah.
It'd be like.
And they rolled out the report in tier 2, but
They just didn't do the release notification.
I don't know if they did. Scott Frost is the one who put it in.
I think that just thinking out loud is, whenever we go, or I think it needs follow up, that OSHA would have been involved in that case, is to team up with an OSHA representative to help do an investigation on what took place, who the personnel was. Maybe they were just filling up to take it somewhere. I don't know that it fell underneath.
The only alarming thing I seen was it was a 9-hour release.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
it kept releasing for 9 hours.
And it was outside, it wasn't
And no
inside.
hazmat teams called.
Was it outside a building or inside a building?
Yeah, that's why I think we got to team up with OSHA. OSHA is going to be asking all those questions. I hate when something happens, everybody keeps asking the same questions. We need to team up with
Well,
OSHA
actually,
and get the rundown.
employees responded to a muster area and accountability for each was confirmed.
But I mean, what I'm saying, but was it released to the ambient?
I know, again, this is
Okay,
all that was in the report.
got it, okay. Because again, there's limitations on, I mean, what Steve just read about leaving the site. I mean, we used to have disagreements with Vertellus. It's like, well, it didn't leave the site. Okay. But I think maybe a point of collaboration is with ISP, letting them know that, hey, if you investigate where there's been a release, let us know, because we're interested in knowing that, because maybe.
There was no police response.
I can't see a coroner not having a police officer there.
You can't move the body. It's a homicide.
Yeah. We don't have all the facts. We don't.
But again, that's the kind of,
Right.
I think that's the kind of stuff that ought to be reported to the CERC.
Right, and I'm thinking there's an opportunity to talk with ISP to say, if you're responding to whatever, and there's been a chemical release, we don't expect you to know all the reportable quantities, but get a hold of Mike or, the guys and say, hey, we're gonna let them make you guys aware that this release has happened, and they can figure out if it's a reportable or not.
This next slide, just evacuation notifications, and it talks about making notifications, National Response Center, department shall implement and evaluate. It's evaluated under subsection if it's practical to implement, is technically feasible, is economically feasible, is protective of human life and the environment. Would adequately serve persons provided under IC 1325. And then the department shall provide a toll-free long distance number through which a person required to provide notice. So is this the spill response line? Is that what it's talking about?
So pretty long, yeah. And for a facility to provide notice, it's through the spill line, and it's also through tier 2. Because through tier 2 manager, the state CERC's notified, the LEPC notified, and the fire department's notified if they have an account, so.
And that gotta be areas likely to be affected by the release and the condition. The State Emergency Planning Commission of any other state is likely to be affected, so notifications need to go if it's gonna affect across state lines. And from time to time that happens, and it just, well, whenever we had a big fire out in Richmond, it looked like a volcano going off. You know, we contacted Ohio, let them know, hey, we got the toxic cloud coming your direction, you know. It wasn't a chemical thing, it's just plastics. Okay. Owner operator shall provide written follow-up of emergency notices, which includes an update information. And this is important. Some of our incidents, they're long-term durations. You know, we can have a fire that goes several days in the chemical industry. They're required to let us and give us status of what's going on, things that are changing during the incident. It talks about material safety data sheets, and we've talked a little bit about, chemicals in the community, right to know type stuff.
That needs to be updated.
Hmm?
MSDS it's now a safety data sheet.
Yeah,
SDS.
it's always gonna be an NSDS to me. I was born and bred on that stuff. So it talks about local planning committee, the commission, the fire department, have those available. Material safety data sheet to identify on the list each element or compound. And I know today is a lot of things internet-based and all that stuff, and trying to, it's supposed to be readily available to the emergency responders. And then emergency hazardous inventory form for tier 2, and that's all taken care of in the tier 2 reporting stuff. But this is where all that comes from.
So number 2 answers your question there.
Estimated ranges.
An estimated range of the maximum amount of hazardous chemical present in a facility at any time during the preceding year.
Right, I know that's but I was just curious if that was still your position is mostly about the fees. You can do the notice, but were you still going to charge them a reporting fee? And it sounds like you are. If they submit a tier 2,
Yeah,
they're gonna pay.
Tier 2, unless they're agriculture, they gotta.
or government.
Oh, mixtures, if they have a mixture of chemicals, they got to give us their best guess of what that is, what the hazards are associated with it. Filing emergency hazard inventory form with the commission, that's all tier 2. Talks about fees. Person may request to the commission or local emergency planning for tier 2 hazmat chemical inventory form information related to the preceding year with respect to request must be in writing and must be made with respect to a specific facility. So we should be getting something in writing with the public asking for that information. We don't just give it out, and they got to justify it too, if I remember the way it's worded. Request from a person must include a statement specifying the general need for the information for the commission or local emergency planning. They got to justify the need. And I would expect if something comes down our way, we present it to the commission, we vet it, make for sure that it is all right to release the information. The commission or local emergency planning shall respond to the request, and it talks about under this section, not later than 7 days after the date the request is received. So I guess if somebody does request it, we got 7 days to respond to that. So I don't know if you guys have thought about what that process looks like.
We acknowledge receipt that we got their request. as far as getting the information to them.
We gotta respond within 7 days.
Right.
All the response is, yeah, we got your request.
Right. Just a little more, I mean, because a lot of people that we deal with think that we have to give them the information within 7 days. It's like, no, we have to acknowledge,
Yeah.
we have to respond that we
Yeah.
got your request. And then it gives us a chance to put the information together, but we still try to respond quickly.
Too.
Pardon me?
So here's the fees. The fees are, correct me if I'm wrong, collecting 200, 100, or 50.
Yeah.
And so it's been that way since the 1980s. Is that correct?
91, I think is when we.
Okay. So, you know, here's our challenge is if we're gonna increase funding to help support the local LEPCs and do other things, I think, based upon what you told us earlier, there's hardly much of any increase in funding since 91. It's been stagnant since 1991. And so as we try to accumulate data, show different things, is if we are gonna get more revenue to help LEPCs make it worth their time, support the mission, we gotta justify that with data and bring in other stakeholders to do that outside of this group. There's a local emergency right to know fund. The purposes to provide each county with funds to help implement SARA. The Department of the State Revenue shall administrate the fund.
Do we accrue interest on our fund? I mean, I don't think the state has to put it in an interest bearing account, but so, okay, I was just curious.
Again, this revenue is produced by any fee or charge imposed under section 10 or 10.4. So all the monies that come in through tier 2, the 100, the 200, the $50 are all considered funds plus late fees. So again, and then talking about our fund in the general budget, the money or interest accrued or whatever is invested into this fund. The difference between our fund and other funds is usually at the end of the fiscal year, most funds that are not spent revert back to the basic general fund of the state. Our fund does not revert back. Our fund stays in our, so we don't lose any money if we don't spend it every year. That's why we're up around 600,000, because we don't lose the money if we don't spend it. You guys understand that?
Yeah, but good does it do our state? It just sit there.
Well, and that's what we're talking
Yeah.
about spending.
Yeah, we're getting ready to get to that. Because I think,
I got a question though, too, that's kind of along these lines, but I guess maybe a little raw. So we were talking about the fees before. If you go one slide prior to this, take a look at the, and might be one for this here. It was 100,000 or 1 million pounds for a fee of $100. My question is, obviously, this has to do with chemical companies. As a state, do we know if the state of Indiana is trying to attract, and we have a healthy economic development in our state, are we trying to attract more companies such as this? Or do we don't want these? Because I know in my community, we don't really want this type of business in our community. But does the state want this? The state doesn't want this either, and we don't, and I would say we definitely need to look at going to the state legislature and changing the fees for this.
So I think the state, I mean, we're bringing in a lot of batteries, but I think the state won't turn down a chemical company that wants to move in.
yeah, and to me, it's like,
But that's not my question. We won't turn them down, but do we want them? That's the question.
I would say in order to support local industry, we have to have it. If Lily's didn't have that type of facilities, Lily's wouldn't be in it.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
Yeah.
My question is, do we want more of that?
Yes.
And I know
Because
there's,
you're thinking increase the fees really high, so they don't want to move
Yeah.
in.
yeah, or, and then we can, and if the fees held don't matter, what do we charge versus other states to do the same thing?
I don't think we even answer that the state drives that, that is, we have a meeting with Indiana Economic Development and ask them, this is what we do. How do we support what you want to do? Does what we do fall in line with what you want to do?
Yeah.
I truly believe it's like zoning. Indiana has places that are very good to be chemical industry. Then there's other places where you wouldn't want them in a bedroom community.
Yeah.
And like whenever, I think it was Anderson had the magnesium fire and the whole neighborhood blew up. We don't want you here anymore. You know what I did? I called him up directly as a fire official from my local fire department. Why don't you come to this jurisdiction? I'd love to have you. You know, there's places that are well suited for it, you know, other places that are not. And I want to support industry in Indiana, and we lose a lot, like the steel industry. Those places have been steel industry, but if we could bring something else into that same area that's a chemical industry, I would think that they're well suited. So I think one of our challenges or one of our opportunities is to integrate with economic development people in Indiana. It's like,
Absolutely.
so.
We also need to integrate with zoning. That was
Yes.
one of the lessons learned out of West Texas. After West Texas blew up, everybody was appalled that there was a school across the street. There was a nursing home over there. And West Tech, and the company was like, wait a minute, when we built our plant here first, we were here first. And then they put a school there and they put this there.
Rock Island Refinery in Marion County. When it was put in there, there was no neighborhoods up in that part of Marion County.
But then zoning is like, well, we'll make this retail, and then it becomes maybe, apartments, and then it becomes, before you know it, we've got houses inside our zone of vulnerability, and who's to blame but us?
Kind of going by what Travis was saying here, though, and we've kind of talked about this for the last couple of years, is even if we double our fees right now, our fees are still way lower.
Well, I'm not even doubling. Like, I would find out what other states are doing, and like,
Right.
hell, if they're charging $10,000 for this, why are
Illinois not charging.
I don't wanna be Illinois.
Yeah.
They're not the model child.
Yeah. But what I'm saying though is, if we
Back to the EPA, so.
Right. If we double the fees like next year, we could double the fees going out to the LEPCs without really making a dent.
Well, that's kind of what my thought is.
Yeah.
And I think have we done any surveys on what other states charge? Hold on, have we?
I think the EPA has, and we can reach out to.
But have we?
No.
I think we should.
We,
Data, everything's data driven.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. If we don't have the data, why are we? I mean, hell, none of this stuff's been changed since the 80s.
Yeah.
This has been.
Anyone.
Excuse my French, but I mean, if this is my community, and we've had these come up, like, what are we doing if we're not updating? Like,
Well, that's what I'm saying to the LEPCs is, yeah, we should be giving you $5,000 a year instead of 25.
And
significantly more than that.
Well, yeah.
And the chemical industry has to carry the ball for us. We're
I
not,
think we have to tell the chemical industry what to do,
Let's get realistic about this.
because they're gonna always try to save the dollar.
Yeah, we can charge $10 million, we can charge $5 million or $5. If the Indiana Economic Development Council Corporation and the fathers downtown at the State House, if you got 5 or 6 companies that are out of Japan or out of Germany or wherever the case may be, they want to invest in here, and they're gonna provide an additional $1.7 billion to a local economy. We can do all the research we want to. Guess what? It's gonna come in.
Not necessarily.
Well,
Well, I mean, if our $100,
but my involvement with the Indiana Economic Development Council is gonna come in. Because no governor is gonna turn down $1.3 billion or $1.8 billion. He can have all of the community meetings that they want to say, folks, this is what we're planning to do. And yes, they're not gonna turn down that money. Quite simple.
But our idea was.
Well, the thing is, the government can't do something with the local government though. Like, the local government says no.
We're not, no,
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 that's true.
with the Economic Development Corporation, the local government can say, no, we don't want that, but
The only time the governor's ever done that in the state of Indiana is they're doing in Lebanon, or in Lafayette right now. Other than that, every other project that's gone on in the state has got to get of local government.
I know, you're right, and they can be talked into it very well.
And the thing is, we gotta get a seat at the table. You know, we got,
To your point here, we got to be there to have a voice.
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, we need to be at the table if hazardous materials are involved, because a fire department does not have to have a hazmat team. And like somebody brought up Lebanon, you know, we've heard talk that Lily's has reached out to Lebanon and say, hey, I don't think they said they built them a new firehouse, but they said, we would support you.
Yeah, they're gonna build them in the
And Lebanon has said, no, we're fine. We're going to stay on
And
small.
my understanding is that Lily's do what they did here is start their own fire department to help support. Because you take a business that commits $1 billion and $1 billion in research and development, they don't want to lose that money, their investment. I mean, you got people that commit that type of investment. They don't want an event to take place to lose it. So Lily's is proven enough that they have their own fire department here in Indianapolis. They have their own hazmat team here in Indianapolis to help protect their investment here in the city.
But it's limited.
Yes.
I mean, they do have limits, and they're seeing those limits within their own structure. What my point is that facilities come and they build and they bring their hazardous materials and they automatically think, I have an accident, I'm gonna call 911 and the fire department is gonna show up and they're gonna take care of it. And what we're finding is Boone County doesn't have a hazmat team. Hendricks County doesn't have a hazmat team. Hamilton County has the task force and whatever Carmel does. Hancock County no longer has a team. And we invested money in Hancock County because we thought what supported Hancock County supported us, but it's expensive. Shelby doesn't have one. Johnson County has Greenwood and Morgan County doesn't have one. And so the counties that are on your map that have hazmat teams are starting to look at it and say, wow, that's expensive. And how thin can we stretch ourselves? I know the fire chiefs are very supportive of mutual aid and we'll be there because we know you'll be there for us. But I mean, down on the foot, IFD is like, we can't have all these counties saying, well, I'll just call IFD.
Yeah, as much as, and we've talked about it, is the response, but we're responsible for the prevention, for the planning also. You know, is if we're gonna have these companies, we should be at the table to help them do the planning, to help them to prevent the industrial accidents. But there's not a whole lot of people within our wheelhouse that are trained enough that understand the industry and the chemicals to go in there to help.
I mean, you've got process safety analysis, hazard analysis, and risk management plans. And
Yeah.
when I mean, when the bad thing happens, they're going to call on local resources.
Yeah.
And so, like we were talking at lunch, I mean, for our LEPC, you know, we'll buy suits for hazmat teams because suits expire sitting on the truck. We'll buy CalGas, we'll buy sensors, we'll buy those things that make it possible for our hazmat teams to respond, even though they've not had to respond because preparedness is expensive, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And we need funding. And, you know, we kind of look at those counties that don't have hazmat teams getting money and they're not really providing any resources other than maybe awareness and ops, and they're not going to make entry. We're going to call another hazmat team. I mean, there maybe needs to look at, and maybe some of that $600,000, making that available to these large hazmat teams who haven't really been designated regional hazmat teams, but have sort of by default become a team because they're big and they're in certain areas like Lafayette and our teams.
Can we get a time check? It's 3 o'clock now, how much more do we have? We're gonna breeze out as possible, right? Hey,
Let's get to brass tacks right here. This is the important thing, and I guess, we'll reopen our meeting.
Can we go back to that real quick? Talk about what they can spend money on.
We take 10 minutes.
Yeah, let's take 2 minutes. We go back up. What we'll do is we'll take 10 minutes, and I would like us to discuss this one and put this to bed one way or the other. And
Yes.
then we can talk about that, because this, I think we need to talk about.
I think we kind of know which way it's going anyway.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that you were talking about, what I tell a lot of my smaller counties, a lot of my smaller communities,
Yeah.
you had something happen. Well, it's been called Monroe Fire District. Okay, do you have an MOU with them? No, it's gonna be hours. Because they have to get permission from their chief.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and all that to look, you know, and with that MOU, I mean, you're familiar with MOUs. It spells out who's paying for what, all that, but it's already understood by your bosses.
I want you to have this. I'm gonna make a copy of it.
All right, or if you wanna give me the-
No,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
You don't have to wait like on a weekend, a holiday weekend, for things to go up the chain and have delays. Everything gets tight. Because like you saw, they're here, they're there. Not everybody.
I mean, what
has, you know,
frustrates-
So you have to reach out to those and make sure they're even willing to respond, you know, outside of their normal.
Right, because there was never, I mean,
Right.
Ron Trout would go to meetings
Right.
and they'd be at exercises. It's like, and we're calling IFD and Ron's like, huh?
Yeah. And I know IFD is pulling back inside. You know, on a lot of it. I've been, Hendricks County is trying to get their stuff together.
Yeah.
They're nervous because right now they
Yeah.
rely on Wayne.
Right.
And Wayne is in negotiations with the IFD.
Yeah.
And so,
And it's, yeah, I know, and we're right in the middle of it, you know, and they're like, what are we gonna, you know, we have to get it together.
and the chief, no chief I've ever known.
Yeah.
And we're not gonna.
Yeah. Right.
There is one.
Oh, is there?
in our-
Okay, well, I've not met him, but most of the one, and that's where Ron ran into with Chief.
Mhm.
And that's easy said, but then when Ron goes to Chief and says, hey, I need $10,000 for the suits that expired. Or, hey, we gotta buy,
Oh, yeah.
we gotta replace our multi-gas meters, or we need
Hazmat's
sensors.
expensive.
It's extremely
That's
expensive.
why a lot of fire chiefs are letting it go by the wayside. They're not funding it.
But somebody is picking it up.
Yeah, they have to, you know, some of them are turning to their
I already
LEPC.
mentioned something to
Haven't
Bruce.
had an LEPC meeting
The
'cause they
printout of
funded.
the compliance document for funding,
Well, now the
she
chiefs are cutting out.
emailed the wrong one.
I turned this.
What? That document right there,
Uh-huh.
Switzerland is supposed to be at the top
We don't have.
in
the-
compliance,
Yeah.
but she sent the wrong one.
That's
She printed it off. The one I emailed was correct, so just so you know, I'm letting you guys know that Switzerland is
somebody
current.
wants to start a
but
hazard.
just, she printed off the wrong one, guys, when I emailed was,
Oh,
so just letting you guys know.
There it goes. It helps you push the button.
In a small LEPC, don't have the, you know,
we
but
had
to do the.
quorum
that was
at our
where I
meeting,
Talked about like.
but like I mentioned,
You know, instead of the, you know, that I know that's all
The chairman
legislative.
stacked
Like,
the
you
room.
know, something created. Don't have that, and they
can't
go,
do that.
Yeah, so it's gone.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not sure that changing the statute to either change what quorum looks like
Well, the
or
requirement,
not even required.
requirements for the number of people that you have to have in there, those 12 representatives.
Yeah. And it should be going out to.
Why do you have to have those 12?
Supporting their teams. That's justice.
Well, but that's the number, well, unfortunately for a quorum, it's usually over half of however many total members there are.
But you're required to have at least 12.
Right, so,
So you always have to have 7.
Mine and bump them up.
oh, you have, but some may have 25.
Oh, I know.
I know, 25 and
Nobody wants to do
They
it.
have many on
you
there.
have to have 13.
I know there are some that did that. Yeah.
Well, and I guess that quorum makes sense from the standpoint having over half of them people there to make a decision, they can vote on it. But I don't know how often do they vote on things at LEPC meetings.
We didn't.
I could see if you're having somebody to vote on. We've done that. We've had IERC meetings that we didn't have a quorum at. We still held the meeting, so we just couldn't vote on it.
Right, yeah.
So it seemed like maybe a similar for LEPCs that unless you only have to have a quorum if you're voting on something.
You still have to have a, whether you vote on anything. or
No,
not.
but I'm saying you change it so it doesn't.
Yes.
Say it, change it so you only have to have a quorum if you're voting on something.
And that would make things easier.
Yes. And that would, and legally would make it more sound because you can have informational meetings without having a quorum of people there. And if you've got some people at proxies, that's the other thing I know, and I'm not sure how it's turned out. So apparently they're allowing proxies.
Well, they're not following what's in here.
Yeah, there's no mention of proxies in that. But apparently on the way he was talking about, they let you designate people to be proxies for other people. It's on their roster. And if you can do that, and if one of those two people can be there,
Yeah.
then that helps make a quorum also.
Yeah, but we've had, Melissa has called me and said, hey, or emailed me, change your roster and then you'll meet quorum.
Shouldn't have money off.
So I'll be changing my roster like 10 times a year.
You've seen the new law.
How often at your LEPC meetings do you actually vote on anything?
Well, we vote every meeting on minutes.
Right.
And so
And their treasurer's report, do you do that?
we approve the report by acclamation. That's Bill's term and I don't
You
know.
bring me some books?
No, I need to talk to you for a second. Forget these guys.
You got books coming, you ordered books.
Nobody can forget
Do I
us.
get a book?
You got books coming too.
Be quiet.
I didn't get a book.
I mean, I get a book, I have to
Give
get a,
you a book.
I got none coming.
where are my books coming from?
Your books are coming through the book.
We'll set one.
Oh, okay.
Drive up and get them.
You're 30 seconds.
I mean, I'll take one if take one. We always try to do a quiz.
Yeah, just run them through so they understand what.
Yeah.
What the blue means, what.
So I need to know what the new answers are.
Yeah, yeah, there's a whole section under batteries. I think it's guide 140.
Okay, well, I know I've been following on the hazmat Facebook page and people are like, oh my gosh, there was a mistake in the book. They forgot to print the pages. And then it said, no, did you see that it was intentionally left blank and there are no materials that refer to this? Otherwise, they would have let the guide out and people would have said, oh no, there's a mistake in the book. They forgot guide 167.
I found a mistake in the statute too.
Oh, you did?
It talks about, it doesn't include transportation except for two specific sections. The two sections they reference don't say anything about transportation. It's the section before that.
Keep anybody here any longer than what we need to be.
How'd you get an ERG? You stole one from him, didn't you?
I did not steal one from anybody.
I'm gonna sell him mine.
Player, I need to.
If you buy us, if you pay us or provide dinner, we'll stay longer. So
Can we buy do they make the little half ones anymore?
You can buy them. Amazon, Amazon ERG
I
online.
like the little ones.
The
They fit my
app's always
purse.
JJ Keller, yeah. I need to download the app. My app is so damn old.
Yeah, I asked him about
I
that.
don't like the app. I
I
want
mean,
the
the app
piece of
I've got
paper.
is some third party brand.
You reference, can you search for things within the end?
Yeah, well, this old app, I need to download a new app. I'm guessing PHMSA has their own, but the one I have is.
You can download this.
Barbara needs to name theirs.
Yep, ERG 2024.
Yeah, mine is data cargo something or other.
You want this?
It's dated 2020, but it's.
I like the paper one. Cause you can make notes.
All right, we ready to begin?
Yes, sir.
Begin again? Yeah.
On the number 4 term.
Yep, we're going to reopen the commission meeting and review under the agenda 8B, review and action of county compliance 2023 for funding just distribution. This is the section on Indiana code that deals with what we do with this line item in our agenda. It says the commission may withhold local emergency planning committee's funding for failure to provide annually to the commission one of the following. So if I understand, just one of these gives us the ability to withhold the funding. The report required under IC 1325-16B4, which is what?
The emergency plan.
Emergency plan, the proof to publish legal, proof of publishing legal notice under SARA, an updated version of the local emergency planning committee's emergency preparedness plan as required under SARA, a copy of the current bylaws of the local emergency planning committee as required by SARA, evidence of an exercise of the response plan required under SARA, and the roster of current membership of the local emergency planning committee as required under IC 1325-16B2. And the minutes for the local emergency planning committee meetings conducted at least 2 times.
On 7 days, every 6 months, it'll be plenty.
Yeah. That's what's in the red box.
I feel like B is actually pretty ambiguous.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
I feel like that statute's pretty ambiguous. You know, if you take a look at when you can use people's training and preparedness, that's a pretty broad range of things, isn't it? Preparedness can be fit into numerous things, and I feel like it gives us the ability to use those funds however we see fit. I think we're being too narrow in our focus on that.
You're what now?
I think we're being too narrow in our reading of the statute.
So if I understand the way it's written, for failure to provide any one of the 7, we do have the ability
I
to.
agree, but I think if you look at section A, 10.6A1 of this chapter, if you read that last line, the commission may use the balance of or withholding funding for purposes of hazardous material training and preparedness. I feel like the preparedness is very ambiguous, and we can use those funds for however we see fit.
Well, yeah, and I think,
So the topic we brought up earlier, redistributing these funds to LEPCs and that not being okay because we can't use those funds in that the $600,000 because we can't redistribute those funds. To me, it says we can.
Yes,
yeah,
we specifically.
But we can send them back out to those same funds that maybe didn't meet these criteria. Is that right?
Well, I guess it's up to the commission though to decide how to go about doing that.
Okay.
So, and we, in the past, what we had talked about doing, and I remember when this was changed, and actually the last part of that is saying the balance of the withheld funding for purposes of hazardous field training and preparedness was changed not that long ago. I guess it's probably 2015, maybe longer than I thought. But it was done because we wanted to be able to give funding to perhaps a neighboring county to be able to do the planning for the county that was non-compliant, but be able to give them the money to help pay for
I
that.
think what you've done, but you don't have the door to get in.
But there's a lot of other different ways that could be used as well. But that's what, at that time, why we did it that way. And we've had limited success in being able to convince counties to work together to agree that, yeah, you can do my plan for me, and yeah, you can have my money. Even though I'm not gonna get it anyway, because I'm not compliant, and it's kind of a,
Yeah.
seems like a silly argument, but.
But if we do the planning district, there's gonna be an agreement. And the money for, say, again, I'm using Jay and Blackford, so Blackford wouldn't be non-compliant because they didn't do a plan because they're part of this district with Jay.
Right.
So Blackford and Jay, the Blackford Jay Planning District gets their full funding.
Right, and that's going forward, but we also, at the time, we were trying to figure out how can we help out this county that wants to help out this neighboring county? And here's a pot of money we could use to help do that with.
My comment would be whatever we do today sets the precedent for the future.
Right.
So
I really don't think we have an option. I mean, in the past, we have required all 7 of those items to be in compliance in order for them to qualify for their funding. And while it says the commission may, we have in the past always taken that as will.
No, we had
required.
times we
Yeah.
Going forward, I think one thing we gotta look at is the whole funding and increasing the fees and getting more funding available, so it is more worthwhile for people to actually comply with the requirements. I think that to the extent that we can use any of the extra money to help facilitate that in the interim, to help get people up to speed or to get them into compliance, that, yeah, we should definitely explore those.
And I think taking those funds and maybe next year do the local emergency planning conference.
That would be a good option.
Well, here's one idea I have for this. Is we just went to the Midwest ASBAC conference in Northwood, Illinois. Transcare provides 6 scholarships for, I wouldn't say low income departments, departments that don't have a lot of money. And I thought a good idea for the Indiana Emergency Response Commission would be to provide 4 scholarships to the Midwest Hazmat Conference next year, fully paid, to departments that are not, you know, hazmat techs that aren't part of IFD or Lafayette, these big towns or big communities have a lot of LEPC funding, but the smaller departments that, you know, we put this out in January and say, hey, the IRC is offering 4 scholarships to Midwest Hazmat Conference, fully paid room, conference fees, everything, and have people apply, and then we review them. We offer the 4 scholarships to, you know, 4 hazmat techs to go to Midwest and get 2 days of training.
I also did that
But
with
how
an
does-
HMEP grant, sorry. And I got money to send 4 people to that conference. And then I didn't have any takers. You know, and we have hazmat techs in the county,
Well, we can't make it, but
Well, my
but you know,
question
it
is-
goes both ways.
How does that money help us fix the LEPCs? How does that sending those people to,
I think that gets local interest in these local smaller departments to get active in their LEPCs. Because again, this is coming from the IRC through the LEPC. You know, we're gonna go through the LEPCs and say, hey, we're offering these scholarships through your LEPC. You find somebody in your, you know, your departments, and then we get these local fire departments more active in their LEPCs. Martin County's a good example. I went down there, they hadn't been active for 10 years. And I met them at a pipeline training, and I met the EMA, and the EMA goes, that ain't worth it. Well, I found 2 of the fire chiefs. I said, hey, it's, you know, $25, almost $3,000 a year. And they're like, well, yeah, we could use $3,000 a year. Nobody even told us about this. So I think it's a way to get more fire department interest to go back to their local LEPC and get more active in the LEPCs.
but activity is only good if it means providing deliverables. Who's going to, I saw for Martin, no compliance documents were submitted. So are those fire departments, are they going to submit the documents?
Well, they're gonna have to get active in the LEPCs.
I think
And
that's,
Martin is still a work in progress.
I think that's our linchpin though. We need to figure out how do we get these people interested in doing it? And so come back to it, guys, $2,500 just isn't enough to get anyone motivated.
But also, you have to withhold funds too, to say you didn't meet the requirements, you don't get the money.
I think we should fund all the ones that are in compliance this year. I agree with that. I think we should not fund the ones that aren't in compliance. But looking at next year, how can we make this, like what, number one mission as a commission? It's protection, right? And how do we protect people that's giving up more money for more education, more training purposes? But we are hamstrung by that because we've not, number one, raised any fees for.
And I agree. Our first step is getting the legislators to raise the fees.
Yes, we have to.
That's the carrot.
Yeah.
You don't get anything without carrot.
Well, I think another thing we should look at is what we're requiring, the 7 things for compliance.
Mhm.
And maybe a statutory change we should consider is whether we need to modify any of that to make it a little easier for them to be in compliance. One of the things that Stephanie and I talked about was that one of the biggest issues they have is getting quorums at meetings. Well, you can have meetings without quorums. You only need a quorum if you're actually voting on taking some specific action. And so, you know, maybe one of the things we should consider is whether a meeting, even without a quorum, could still qualify as a meeting for purposes of funding, as long as when you have a vote on something, you be sure you have a quorum there.
Do the federal guidelines require meetings?
And that's something, I wish our legal person was here, but she bailed on us, but I think that's something, because it don't say in there requiring a quorum, that the commission could say 2 meetings on separate days, every 6 months. I think the commission can vote and say, we don't require a quorum, but if you're gonna vote on something that requires a quorum.
The question though is it a meeting if you don't have a quorum?
Well, again, in writing up there, it don't say anything about quorum.
Well, this is correct. back into what's considered a meeting.
I think the only reason you're really required to have a quorum is if you're having a vote on something.
I mean,
So you have over half your members
for
voting.
example, they had a meeting in what county did you say you're at?
3 people?
She's like, no one showed up. So if no one showed up, how's that a meeting?
Right.
I
Well,
mean, it's scheduled. I mean, and that's the situation we get into, I think.
so maybe it's a matter of providing a little guidance. That obviously with that kind of situation, you wouldn't want to.
But what I'm thinking is we don't have to change the law to change the way we describe a meeting.
That's true.
What do you say, Bill?
I'm gonna go back to Robert's Rules of Orders. And they vote to approve their previous minutes and their budget reviews. So then you have to have a quorum. So if you remove that requirement that they have to vote with their minutes and budgets out of any meeting, you don't have to have a quorum.
You only got to vote once for your fiscal report.
Yeah.
So
So
you could vote for all 4 meeting minutes in one meeting.
Yeah, and I don't think we're gonna solve how to spend the money. I do believe we need to take those funds for the biggest impact. Got 92 counties. And like, if there's gotta have at least 2 meetings, one of them that will qualify is LEPC conference meeting. It doesn't say it has to be in the Monroe County. Just give them credit for coming to the conference.
Can't get them to go,
You gotta do
we
minutes.
can't get them to go to the meetings in their hometown, let alone.
Yeah, people like going to conferences.
Yeah.
And if we provide the conference, we gotta start somewhere. We could all sit here and say, that isn't gonna work, that isn't gonna work. I need to reinvest that in the machine and put forth the effort to give the ability to make change in Indiana and with changes under Indiana law that makes it easier to administer and get LEPCs more active.
As the LEPCs stopped coming to the LEPC conference when it was switched over to more of the Homeland Security, the gentleman from Marshall County that died, Bob Blythe, all of those guys, he came before he died, of course, but they said, this is a response conference, not a planning conference. And they just backed out of coming. They said, why are we gonna come down for LEPC meetings for 1 hour or hour and 15 minutes at lunchtime?
Yeah.
And then sit there the rest of the time. I'm a firm believer that the LEPC conference separate will get our LEPCs back to the table. It may not be half the first year, maybe 40% the first year, because right now we're looking at probably 35 to 40% of the LEPC chairs are either EMA directors or sheriffs of respective areas. If we want to have them come, the ones in small counties that are not in compliance, let's offer some scholarships to them. If they want to come, they'll have the money, even though they got money maybe in their budget a little bit, offer some scholarships there. But I do think we need to get back to the basics through the circular information that we had and what it was related to. And, you know, from one commission standpoint, I think it's time to get back to the individual LEPC conference, the full day or the day and a half.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm back to my original motion to, vote on funding for the compliant counties and no funding for the non-compliant counties.
Okay, we do have a change because there's a mistake on the Switzerland County is listed in non-compliant, but they are compliant.
Yes,
Is there anybody else that needs to come off that list?
it was the only one.
So the motion would
With
include,
that motion, I would include Switzerland as a compliant. You made a motion? I made a motion.
I second.
okay, second motion. Discussion? Take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
And what's it?
I,
Aye. Okay, everybody, any nays? No nays. So, you know, I think at the next meeting, we need to put on the agenda on the funds that would have gone to them, is everybody bring to the table. Because I think whatever's going to be the biggest impact is just, I think a conference and supporting them, because it's easy to sit in all of our chairs and never have that personal contact with them. I need to talk to them. I need to hear them. We need to communicate face to face. And I think that's important. The first one, we need to engineer it so it's successful. And so they can go back to their people and say, that was really worth our time.
Well, one thing we can look at is, again, if we get the NASPO conference for next year in Indianapolis, we could almost have an LEPC conference in conjunction with the NASPO conference. And bring more LEPCs, because the 3 LEPCs that went to the NASPO conference this year, they really learned a lot.
It was Blackford County, new LFC chair. It was Floyd County secretary, who'd been in it for several years, but had never heard of NASPO. And Washington County, new LFC chair, and a firefighter attended NASPO this year.
So that would be, usually it's in the spring and around the end of April. So we'd give us plenty of time to plan for it, and that would be another carrot to throw at NASPO to bring it to Indianapolis to say, hey, we're gonna hold an LEPC conference in conjunction with the national conference, and I think they would dig that.
I guess I would also request for our next meeting, if, I think we need to start working on this fee increase issue. And we need to be able to put together a proposal to take to the legislature where they can see that, okay, if you increase the fee by this amount, this is the amount of money you're going to generate. Here's how that money is going to be utilized. I think that one of my thoughts is that we may want to decrease the percentage that needs to come to the IERC. Currently, we're spending twice as much as what we're bringing in. But if you increase the fees significant enough, I think you could probably lower the percentage a little bit, which would be a good message to send to folks that we're actually wanting to invest a greater percentage into the LEPCs, and figure out what that might translate to as far as monies going to different categories of LEPCs, large, small, medium. And I guess kind of get a gut check on, so is that an amount of money that would help turn around some of these folks?
I think,
As far as
I
one
think
to
too,
fly.
we need to definitely check what other states are charging.
That was the other thing I
If other
thought.
states are charging $1,000 or $2,000, charging 100, then maybe that discussion is even more so that you don't need any help funding from the state. It can be funded, it can be self-funded, and then you're definitely speaking legislative language.
Is it too late right now for legislation for this year? So it would have to be next year
Yeah.
to go into effect for 2026.
Probably typically going to go in a budget cycle, maybe with the state,
So
26,
26, 27.
26, 27.
But a lot of LEPCs that are inactive right now, if they know that budget or that money increase is coming, they would probably become active.
yeah,
And we could make a caveat, hey, you need to be active the year prior to this new funding takes effect.
Well, if we knew it was coming, we could even use some of this extra money we have to go ahead and increase the amount. The other thing that probably needs to be looked at as part of that is that currently Department of Revenue is the one who handles collecting all the money and distributing it. And it's very scripted in the statute how they can distribute it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know many years ago when I was at the agency, Revenue was very interested in getting rid of not having to do that. They'd be more than happy if the fire marshal's office or some other entity, state entity, took over the distribution of those funds. And so it might be something to consider and look at, is moving that out of Revenue and putting it with some other
Yeah.
agency to do the actual distribution.
It'd be another legislative change.
Well, and you're right, it would be there, but it also might be something that could be considered in conjunction with, if you're talking about increasing the fees, let's talk about changing how they're distributed.
Yeah.
And have the statute reflect that.
So should we appoint a legislative committee from the commission to be involved in this? I mean, we used to have committees. We used to have a legislative committee. So it wasn't just staff doing this and then reporting to us during meetings. The IRC was actively, or the commissioners were actively engaged in the process.
I think we do need, but we've got to bring industry into that committee. Because the legislature, they don't want to hear increasing fees anywhere. It's got to come out from our stakeholders.
Right.
You know, and that's, I think, our biggest, we've got to bring people to the table. We've got to be at other people's table. We've got to network this group so that we can show the picture that we saw today, like you're taking it back to your county commissioners, is we got to take this message out to show the need in the chemical industry in Indiana. This is where we're at. We've got a third of our LEPCs that are not active. And it's important that we have active LEPCs in your communities. And
No, I agree with that, but I'm saying we are the CERC. IDHS is not the CERC.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to, as a commission, embark upon legislative change, should there not be a legislative committee
yes,
that works on that?
yeah, because we don't have time to talk about everything during
Right.
these sessions.
But I mean, we got away from that. We got away from all the committees where a lot of the work and the details got hammered out. And we ended up hammering out the details at the full IERC meeting. And that's not how we used to do things.
Yeah.
And we need to get back into that, like the point was raised about having committees. I mean, committees is where the work took place.
Yeah,
That's where we brought in the partners. And so whatever point we start with this legislative change, I'm saying we should have a legislative committee,
yes.
whether everybody's on it or just a few people are on it. That's not, but we should have a group that includes commissioners in that discussion.
And the only thing we have to do is go back about 9 months and look on there was a list of all the committees and everybody that was on the committees.
Still on the website, it just hasn't been updated.
It's still on the website, and you have the authority to reappoint, assign those committees, and as a whole, you can say, one appointment,
Yeah,
legislative committee, positive, policy tech committee, communication committee, training committee, and finance committee.
well, I guess,
But I don't know that we need all those committees at once.
Communication committee,
Pardon me?
definitely communication committee, policy tech committee.
Right, but I'm just saying, right now, it seems like our mission is this legislative.
Yeah.
Legislative change, and that's what I'm saying.
our biggest impact to improve right now is some legislative changes to help the LEPCs to be able to function easier. And get them, and I don't want to branch off too many areas, then we're not effective in any of them. I think it's important, like you said, to get a legislative committee and then work to get the right people involved in that. Because anytime you're going to increase fees, it takes a lot of work, and you got to have the right people, and the legislators need to hear it from outside of our organization.
I would agree that we need to legislate it, but all of this is also about policy change. So we're gonna need a policy committee.
Could you not have it policy legislative?
You can have legislative / policy. yes, you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the two will work hand in hand.
We also would need a research committee, one to help research with the states and see what each one is doing.
We don't need a committee to do that. Yeah, we can just get on a phone call.
I think that.
Any of us can do that.
Do we have that information already available?
We probably get it from this, we'll contact Monica, FEMA. Say, you got a breakdown of what the states pay.
Every state has
Yeah, and I'll email that evaluation because it lists all the states and maybe there's a contact that we can start calling and get information about all the different LEPCs throughout the country.
I think that would give us, I think once we have the research done, then we can take a look at that and start building some lists.
I mean, even Tim Gable House will probably give us from NASPO.
And I think that's when we come and build probably a legislative committee or even as a group, we're not a big commission general, so I don't know if we actually need any. I mean, how many of us are there? Well,
There's 13,
13.
and with 2 positions open right now, currently, I think 11.
I nominate Travis to be the lead.
Legislative committee? He seems to be very knowledgeable. I would support second. Motion closed.
It's up to the chair. to appoint the committee.
Oh, so-
Yeah, no, I think if you're willing to, because you've got some experience that a lot of us don't have. And I think that's where this group, it's why we all come from different areas, is because it takes all these different levels of experience coming to the table to deliver something that really profits the state. So we will create a legislative committee, and typically what I understand is you met right before the other meeting,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That way it's not causing people to have to, a bunch of different days. So we'll look at that to see what that looks like.
I
Yeah,
have-
I'll comment on it.
Okay, anybody want to make a motion
I make a
to?
motion to adjourn.
Well, can I make a comment first? The conference?
Yeah.
You're gonna do a conference? As you know, the other stuff, there's no dates and there's no venues for these other conferences. That's supposed to be going on this fall. So need to find out as soon as possible. If you're going to do a conference, it needs, you need to get planning now,
Yeah, you know, we
not
can-
I'm sure you
October.
can have one. Get this.
No, for next year,
Yeah,
for
for
next
next
year.
year.
It takes at least a year to do it right.
we need to get a venue and a date. and start-
Reach out to NASPO and I can reach out to them this week and say, hey, you know, here's what we will do if you come to Indianapolis. We'll have a LEPC conference also in conjunction because they're leaning toward Indianapolis.
Are there meetings at a certain, do they usually meet in the spring or?
It's usually last week of spring.
Because there's hot in Houston and then they usually do this one in.
We just did it 2-3 weeks ago down in North Carolina.
April 22nd through the 25th.
But usually-
So now would be
Week
the
after
time to
FDIC. We won't send you FDIC.
Let's do something to pull the
Yeah.
groups together that
Ooh, right.
encourage them to come.
Well, I mean, that would draw LEPCs to Indianapolis for not only us, but the NASPO conference. They can learn, you know, nationwide stuff and if we have a big showing, we might get it more often, we don't have to travel.
Springtime's a good time since everything's always in.
Cause I don't think they've had like a whole search show.
Not that we're over, but
They cooped up all winter.
we have motion to adjourn and then continue. Second. Okay, so we got that squared away
Time.
on that. Let me flip through here because I don't want us to,
What's only 2:45, your time?
oh, where are we at? Come on.
But I live in your time zone.
Oh, you live in our town. I forgot.
Yeah, so it's 10 o'clock. It's 3 hours. Should
It's just,
should came up with time.
yeah, I was just, let me,
Well, one of the other things we were talking about was the LEPCs being able to pay for people to do reports and plans and stuff like that. And the 8 areas that they can spend money, it's in your.
It's under the administrative fees, isn't it?
Page 13. Yeah, I know of the, this. Number one is preparing and updating comprehensive emergency response plan required under 42 USD for county emergency planning districts.
I think it's in
So,
bylaws.
they're able to pay for somebody to submit for emergency plan.
Problem is you're gonna put in as much to
It's in the
fill out the plan as they're gonna get for filling out
in
the
the
plan.
bylaws.
Oh,
Somebody volunteers, you give them $1,000. They'll do the plan, plus they'll do all the other reporting for the year. And, you know, that's one way of, you know, the excuse, well, they're volunteers, they don't get anything for
I
it.
think you probably can pay them though. They're volunteers, you can't pay them that money.
But you can pay to have somebody prepare the plan.
Yeah, but you could,
So they're basically, they're.
they'd have to be 1099 or something like that. Like,
Well,
Stuff.
we've done it before as a contractor.
yeah, like it's 1099.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Vandenberg County, they have somebody that works for them all the time that does everything.
Yeah, John Hooker, he does about 4 or 5 counties.
Yeah.
So.
I'd be happy to pay somebody to do
Possibility is
that.
there.
Mike,
Yes.
I got a question. This is something I don't really understand. It says in the IT code that they have to turn in the minutes for 2 meetings. Got separated out, but on the website, it says they're required to have 4 meetings.
They're required to have 4 meetings a year. 2 meetings.
It says 2 meetings every 6 months, but on the,
Yeah.
That's 4. 2 plus 2 is 4.
2 meetings every 6 months and 4 meetings.
They're going back in.
I appreciate everybody's time today.
2 meetings a year.
Be 2 meetings every 6 months.
That's not very good.
Anyway, we'll discuss, you guys can discuss.
Meeting adjourned.
Yeah. No, I appreciate everybody's time today. Listen, listen up, Russ,
I'm not gonna.
Bill, okay. I appreciate everybody's time today. I know we covered a lot of stuff today, but, to be focused on what our mission is here, I thought it was a good thing for us to sit down and just go through all this stuff. There's a lot to do, in the state of Indiana. But appreciate everybody's input, and we'll look at getting the legislative committee rolling and start, getting to the table in all these different areas, that we need to drive this forward. Any closing comments?
Just a couple. One, I'd like to offer, even though Bruce and I worked with Jeff on this, Jeff did the yeoman's share of that. And let's say thank you, Jeff, for pulling this together. It's a lot of good information. Also to you, Marshall, I'd like to say thank you for facilitating this. Because of the fact, without keeping us on track, and right, it's a good job. And also thank you for agreeing that maybe it's time to go back to 1.5 day LEPC conference in conjunction with NASPO.
Picture, we're gonna do a group picture. We'll
Yes,
do
up
that
front.
up front. So I guess on our way out, if you got time, do a group picture out front.
Yeah, let's make
That time to fix my makeup.
Please.
you want the picture next to the eagle though, right?
Yeah, I want the arm around the eagle.
Could you please send me the PowerPoint? I'm gonna make sure it's
I
on
mean,
the website.
it's on Marshall's computer, but there's a couple of boo-boos I need to fix.
That's fine. As soon as you fix them, just send them to me. Marshall, if you got a chance, could you send me the ones that you had too as well? We had several on the line that's wanting to see them. So,
When you sent that to me, I tried to open on my iPhone,
all right, thank you all for attending.
but because it was a black
Those,
background and white
PowerPoint
print,
and-
it just came out as a blank
The
screen,
website for you.
except for the yellow print, the heading.
Good day.
I thought, what the